Hello, and welcome to SPARK Tank, where innovation meets community action. I'm Laura Lang, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the CEO of Honestly, Youth Sexual Health, the backbone organization for the Central Oklahoma Teen Pregnancy Prevention Campaign. In 2015, the collaboration set a goal to reduce the teen birth rate by 1/3 by 2020. After achieving that goal a year early, the collaboration established a new benchmark to reduce the teen birth rate by an additional 25% by 2025. In an effort to build on the significant progress of the collaboration, Honestly applied for and was awarded funding from the Federal Office of Population Affairs for an Innovation and Impact Grant in 2020. And they really do pay me to say this. The grant activities you'll hear about today were supported by grant number 1 TP2 AH0000670100 from the federal HHS OASH Office of Population Affairs. And we are very grateful to have been recipients of that grant award because it produced all of what you're going to see today. With this funding, Honestly created SPARK Innovation OKC with the goal of creating a network of trained, connected partner organizations to develop innovative and equitable tools that empower and equip caregivers to have conversations with the young people in their lives about healthy behaviors. This network of connected and trained caregivers supports young people in making healthy decisions for their future and ultimately contributes to the reduction in teen pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections in Oklahoma County. This grant allowed us to recruit and lead 2 different cohorts of innovators. And by cohort, I'm talking about a group of organizations that applied for and were chosen to address a need in their community through human-centered design. Cohort 1 began in 2021, and today we will check in with 2 of those organizations. In this final year of SPARK, Cohort 1 partners recruited other organizations that implemented their original innovation with another community of caregivers through what we call replication. You will get the chance to meet some of these replication partners today, and they will be helping to introduce the other cohort members. Cohort 2 began in 2022, and we will check in with 6 of those organizations today. Through SPARK Innovation and our partnership with these 2 cohorts, we have funded 18 community organizations, reached more than 887 youth, 1,812 caregivers, and more than 4,400 community members. And we are so proud of that reach. Thank you. Today, we'll also hear from one of our Honestly team members to set the stage with an exploration of the history of sexual health and conclude by hearing from a national award-winning sexuality educator and subject matter expert in the areas of health equity and sexual health. Our moderator for today is Carly Stout-Dethridge. Carly is the SPARK Innovation OKC Program Manager for Honestly. Carly has experience in and is passionate about program development, relationship building, leadership development, and applying a public health approach to all areas of health. You can find Carly on a run with her dog, Kai, trying new food, or at almost any outdoor festival in Oklahoma City. Welcome, Carly. Thank you so much for your incredible work on SPARK Innovation and for making this event so special.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for that introduction, Laura. I'm so excited to be here and to be able to introduce you to some incredible people making a positive impact in our community. Here's what you should expect over the next 4.5 hours. As Laura said, we are going to meet 8 awesome organizations that were awarded innovation grants to create programs to provide caregivers and adolescents in our community with better ways to give and receive information about sexual health and wellness. We will take periodic breaks, which I hope you will use to move, stretch, and hydrate, and we will break for a 30-minute lunch around noon. We will also have exciting giveaways for those viewing at home that you won't want to miss, so be sure to stay with us throughout the entire event. The organizations you will meet today are a part of what we call the network, and were awarded a grant from Honestly to utilize human-centered design techniques to create innovative solutions for caregivers to address adolescent sexual health with the youth in their lives. The network of connected organizations developed and fostered techniques and resources to provide caregivers with the tools to help the youth in their lives achieve optimal health outcomes. The network is here today to showcase the impact their project has made on their community, share successes, and their hopes for the future. If you're interested in getting in touch with any of the organizations you hear from today, feel free to reach out to us at info@honestly.org, and we will gladly get you connected. You will also see our contact information on the screen right now, and also will be up during breaks. We have a lot to share at Spark Tank this year, so let's go ahead and get started. We will start by hearing from Dr. Ronell Matthews. Dr. Ronell Matthews is the Director of Equity and Strategic Partnerships for Honestly. She has over 20 years of experience in program development, implementation, and evaluation. Her primary areas of concentration have been chronic disease prevention and sexual and reproductive health education. She is passionate about meaningful community engagement, authentic ways of infusing diversity, equity, and inclusion into her work, and making an impact on the health of communities and families. Ronell holds a Master of Public Health degree from the University of Oklahoma and a PhD in Maternal and Child Health from the University of Maryland College Park. She is currently a Robert Wood Johnson Culture of Health Leader, serves on the board of Planned Parenthood Great Plains, and mentors other public health professionals with a particular emphasis on career development of young African American women. Her modes of self-care include arts and crafts, journaling, playing strategy games, reading, singing, watching movies, and writing short stories and poetry. I now welcome to the stage Dr. Ronell Matthews.
All right. Hey, y'all. Get my notes together. So I've already been introduced, but my name is Dr. Ronell Matthews, and I'm the Director of Equity and Strategic Partnerships with Honestly. Today, I was given the task of providing a brief history of sex education in Oklahoma and the nation. And I'm going to do that, sort of. I am going to provide you all with some history, but I thought it would also be fitting for us to talk a little bit about the current state of things and the future. But first, I'm going to give you a definition of comprehensive sex education. Comprehensive sex education is based on the idea that young people have the right to be equipped with the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values they need to determine and enjoy their sexuality physically and emotionally. It views sexuality holistically as a part of young people's physical, emotional, and social development. It recognizes that information alone is not enough and that young people need to be given the opportunity to acquire essential life skills and develop positive attitudes and values. It covers a broad range of issues relating to physical, biological, emotional, and social aspects of sexuality, and it recognizes and accepts that all people are sexual beings and is concerned with more than just the prevention of disease and pregnancy. Comprehensive sex education requires that we teach about gender, sexual and reproductive health, HIV/AIDS, sexual rights, pleasure, violence awareness, diversity, and healthy relationships. So now that we have that foundation, let's look at a brief history of sex education in the United States. And if you can't see that, I promise you I'm going to be walking through this, and I'll also be adding some additional dates in between. So as you can see from the timeline, in 1912, the United States began educating students about reproduction and pregnancy in public schools. In 1950, the American Medical Association and other advocates began pushing for more robust sexual health education and created a standardized curriculum. Now, we can all probably imagine what that looked like, what it may have looked like. I'm gonna be generous. Because for many of us, sex education in schools meant separating kids and talking to the girls about periods and maybe about how babies were made, and talking to the boys about puberty. And I'm using binary language on purpose because that's the way it was, and in many places still is done. Picture it. I'm gonna age myself here. In 1986, I was in the 5th grade, a long time away from 1912 and 1950. My classmates and I were taken into a tiny annex building, shown a video, and not allowed to ask any questions. And I can tell you that I was really confused, and I know I wasn't alone. And in many ways, the education that I and others received probably did not look that much different than what those kids received way back then. Then as a result of that education, which was probably woefully inadequate, sex education came under fire from conservative and religious groups who argued that teaching teens about sex only encouraged sexual risky behavior. This was in a direct response to the push for more robust education, and these arguments don't sound much different than the arguments that we are still hearing today. In the 1980s, the HIV/AIDS epidemic gave conservatives the fuel they needed to suppress sex education in schools. Imagine that. An epidemic that was costing countless lives, an epidemic that needed resources, education, and innovation was used as the reason to provide kids with less potential life-saving information. Make it make sense. Since we're kind of sitting in the 80s right now, here's a fun fact. According to Planned Parenthood, since 1982, the federal government has spent over $2 billion on abstinence-only until marriage sex education programs. In 1986, abstinence-only advocates used $250 million in funds allocated to them for abstinence-only education. These programs required, here's just some of the things that they required. They require that they have an exclusive purpose on teaching the social, psychological, and health gains to be realized by abstaining from sexual activity. It teaches that abstinence from sexual activity outside of marriage is the expected standard. It teaches that abstinence from sexual activity is the only certain way to avoid out-of-wedlock pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, and other associated health problems. That mutually faithful, monogamous relationships in the context of marriage is the only expected standard of sexual activity. That sexual activity outside of the context of marriage is actually likely to have harmful psychological and physical effects. That bearing children out of wedlock is likely to have harmful consequences for the child, parents, and society. It teaches young people how to reject sexual advances and how alcohol and drug use can increase vulnerability to sexual advances. That it's important to attain self-sufficiency before engaging in sexual activity. And it usually omits things and topics like abortion, masturbation, and sexual orientation, and often uses fear tactics to promote abstinence to limit sexual expression. So while maybe a couple of these aren't all that bad if you squint a little bit, there are obvious problems that I don't need to point out to you. And I also think that we can also infer what is missing. There are probably no conversations about gender, sexuality, safety, pleasure, and joy. Many medical and public health professionals argue that promoting abstinence only until marriage as the only legitimate option for young people violates medical ethics and even has the potential to harm young people. We know that such programs generally withhold information about pregnancy and STD prevention and overstate the risk of contraceptive failure. There's a lot of shame and no conversation about the fact that people have the right to self-determine what is best for their lives and their futures. There is no reproductive justice and reproductive well-being grounding. And just for a little background, reproductive justice is a concept developed by Sister Song, and it is the belief that all people have, one, the right not to have children, the right to have children, and three, the right to parent the children they have in safe and healthy environments. And reproductive well-being is a concept developed by Power to Decide, and it's based on the belief that all people have the right to equitable access to information, services, systems, and support that they need to have control over their bodies and to make their own decisions related to sexuality and reproduction throughout their lives. These principles are key to ensuring that all people are able to live healthy lives without the shame and guilt that is instilled by sex education that is not comprehensive, medically accurate, culturally responsive, and inclusive. So here we go, fast forward to a little bit more recent dates. In the 1990s and the early 2000s, advocates for comprehensive sex education continued to call for a reform to abstinence-only curriculum. But in 2003, despite these efforts, federal funding for abstinence-only programs was increased by the Bush administration to over $15 million annually, and in 2004, $170 million a year was allocated to abstinence-only programs. In the same year, a report by the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform found that 2/3 of the abstinence-only education curricula studied contained incorrect scientific information regarding condom failure, sexually transmitted diseases, the health consequences of abortions, and mental health. Much of this information directly contradicted scientific findings of government agencies such as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The report also asserted that many of these curricula also promoted gender stereotypes about female passivity and male aggressiveness, and that's in quotes. These are attitudes that often correlate with harmful outcomes, including domestic violence. Some of these curricula contained messaging, for example, such as, if you have sex, you'll become as undesirable as an already chewed up piece of gum, and that girls are like crock pots and heat up slowly over time, but boys are more like microwaves. They get very hot very quickly, and these are direct quotes from those curricula. Because a lot of research and advocacy in favor of comprehensive sex education, in 2007, nearly half of all states had decided against applying for state-based abstinence-only education due to its restrictions, as well as the requirement that states contribute matching funds for their implementation. But Oklahoma was not one of those states that did not apply. In 2009, the Obama administration committed over $75 million to comprehensive sex education and instituted many restrictions, including the restrictions that they provide matching funds. Abstinence-only programs came to a brief halt in 2010, but were reinstated in recent years, with funding for these programs increasing threefold from 2015 to 2017. Sorry, I lost my place. Let's see. I'm sorry. Anyway, despite these challenges that we face, we have some of the most talented professionals in the field right here in the great state of Oklahoma. So what does all this mean? I mean, you can look at the timeline and see the back and forth between those who are for and against providing comprehensive sex education for youth. When we make gains, those who oppose comprehensive sex education push back. There are relentless misinformation campaigns and policies that seek to roll back the gains that we've made. So let's take a look at the definition of comprehensive sex education again. As you can see, comprehensive sex education is based on the idea that young people have the right to be equipped with the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values they need to determine and enjoy their sexuality physically and emotionally. And there are those who oppose this. Think about that. Think about the fact that there is a not insignificant resistance to the idea that young people deserve to have access to the tools they need to experience optimal sexual health. There is a concerted effort to keep our children uninformed. There is a considerable amount of effort in our state to enact regressive policies that will remove sex education from schools, prevent any discussion about sexuality, and prohibit trans kids from accessing the health care they need. The group Stop CSE Oklahoma says that all of the curricula used by the amazing health educators in our collaboration contain content that is harmful to children. They assert that the evidence-based programs we use sexualize children, encourage promiscuity, promote risky behavior, do not provide medically accurate information about the long-term consequences of early sexual debut and experimentation, and put parental rights at risk. This is the rhetoric that we are up against. These are the untruths that are being told about the amazing work that our partners are doing in this collaboration. And I thought you should know this because it's easy to exist inside of our bubbles where we know and understand the importance and impact of the work we do. But we know that not everyone is so excited about our work. We know that comprehensive sex education is under attack in Oklahoma and across the country. We know that we have a lot of work to do to make sure that Oklahoma kids and families continue to have access to comprehensive sex education. So, what does that look like? I believe that ensuring continued access to comprehensive sex education looks like building more partnerships with faith communities, community-based organizations, and clinics, for example, so that we can provide education in non-traditional settings. It means building easily accessible online and digital education platforms, involving whole families in advocacy efforts, and providing comprehensive sex education to both kids and caregivers, many of whom did not receive adequate sex education when they were young. Which is why SPARK Innovation OKC and this event, SPARK Tank, is so exciting. We are working with organizations that are developing innovations that have the broad-reaching implications beyond this project. We are working with people who recognize the need for innovation in this space, and they are doing something about it, and that's amazing. So we've looked at the past. Let's think about the future. I think that in the future, we will be providing a lot more sex education in non-traditional settings. I believe that is key, and because we have amazing partners like the ones who you'll be hearing from today, partners who are dreaming big and imagineering the future, I think this is possible, and I think that medically accurate sex education information is pivotal. And because of this innovative work that's being done right here in Oklahoma, that timeline that we looked at in the beginning of this presentation can continue into a promising future for Oklahoma children and families. Thank you all for listening to me, and enjoy the rest of SPARK Tank.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Ronell Matthews. I really feel inspired by that. I think Ronell gave us some hard truths about where we've been and inspired us about where we're going, and I think we should give her another round of applause. Okay, so we are actually going to do our first giveaway of the day. So all of our giveaways today are from our amazing keynote speaker, Dr. Tanya Bass. We have t-shirts that say collards, condoms, and consent on them, and a conversation card deck around the circles of sexuality, which she's actually going to speak on a little bit later. So congratulations to our first winner, Christina Flores. Be sure to stay with us as we will have 3 more drawings during our time together. So we've been talking about these amazing innovation organizations, and now we are going to start hearing from them. The first group of organizations you will meet today are a part of Cohort 2, and we will start with B&C. B&C Global is a team of enterprise service professionals that provides a means of elevation to the community through training and development. Here's a brief video about their project.
Our innovation is that we created a training to support caregivers that work with youth and child welfare. And at this point, it's been a whole nother world of resources that we've been able to provide to those caregivers.
Without SPARK, oh my goodness, I would still be stuck in having those conversations. I would have either bypassed it altogether, or it would have been very rough terrain to power through.
Some of the problems our caregivers were facing was just pretty much lack of training, lack of resources in reference to sexual health information entirely. When we started this, we did a lot of interviews, talking to different caregivers from different fields of work that supported youth in care. And one thing that was a common trend is that there was no designated training for sexual health. Our training provides a variety of resources and information, but we really focus in on some of the key components that are happening in today's time, such as sexual identity, gender identity, and most importantly, just really helping the caregivers create a safe space for the youth to open up and talk to them.
SPARK has definitely made the sex talk easier, as well as helped me to understand and even talk to my children about different topics like gender identity.
Ultimately, this training has really taken things to another level for caregivers and allowed them to really support their youth all the way through and not just on some of the more basic life skills. You're not alone. This is a very challenging topic. Sexual health is not something easy to just deal with or talk about, but you got some support coming, and we're excited to serve you.
Since I've opened up the dialogue with my children about sexual health, they come to me and they ask different questions. There'll be 1 or 2 questions at a time, and then they'll, I'll give their answer, the answer they want or they need, and they go on about their day. And I'll get another question sometime down the road.
SPARK has definitely made the sex talk easier, but it's also made it funner. Sex is a taboo conversation for a lot of people, but our goal is to remove the shame behind the conversation and really give people a level of comfort when it comes to talking about sex. It's a natural human component of our lives. My advice to any grantee that's interested in the SPARK Initiative OKC grant, apply. You're needed, your project is needed, and the resources you get throughout the process of developing it, it'll last you a lifetime.
Joining us now on stage are Brondalyn Coleman and Timber Hudson with BNC Global. They are joined by 4 amazing leaders and content experts who will guide the conversation with each organization today so we can learn more about each project. We have Dr. Tyler Burns, they, them, Data and Strategic Learning Specialist at Honestly. Brittany Keck, she, her, Training and Capacity Building Manager at Honestly. Dr. Ronell Matthews, she, her, Director of Equity and Strategic Partnerships at Honestly, and Susan Mooring, she, her, Investment Principal at Cortado Ventures. Thanks you all for setting right in order for that. Tyler, will you start us off with the first question?
Can you tell us a bit about BNC Global, the work you do, and what the problem or issues that you saw were that led you to apply for SPARK?
Maybe, yeah, greetings. So BNC Global really was a love gift. My fiance actually gifted me a consulting agency about 6 years ago, and it allowed me to really just kind of step into the world of service when it comes to child welfare. So we provide trainings to caregivers, foster parents, and those that serve youth that are in foster care. And this grant really spoke to us because not only do we have our own lived experience as being foster care alumni, but as working professionals in the field, it was clear that this is one subject matter that was completely being missed over. And we were watching and working with youth that are transitioning out of care, and we want to make sure that everybody has all the information they need to be successful and healthy and living the best life they can.
Thank you. So what is something that you learned from the human-centered design process, and how has that impacted your work outside of SPARK?
Absolutely. The human-centered design process was so amazing. Being able to really understand how to capture information using the voices and working with the people that really know what they need. And so when we were creating and coming up with ideas of what project could we really do to impact or make a difference in this area, I think the thing that stood out to me was understanding the importance of having their voices at the forefront. Like, I think we work in this field and sometimes you can get bogged down with just doing the work and trying to get things done. And it was really inspiring to understand the importance and be able to explain that to the participants and caregivers that we were working with. So that was probably one of my things. What do you think, Timber?
Personally, I think that the human-centered design process has really allowed us to gain more understanding of the power of using data to drive decisions and changes, and really using the evaluation the evaluation process to really improve what is being offered to our community. And so it really helps us hone in on who is our audience, how do we make this undeniably something for them specifically in this really unique product.
Well, tell us a little bit about your caregivers and why it's important that they are the focus of your project.
Yeah, so we think of caregivers in a very expansive way, right? Caregivers are sometimes adults that are taking care of young people. Sometimes caregivers are young people that are taking care of other young people, right? And so when it comes to our audience of caregivers often ranges, right? For some of that, it is young people that work in peer support roles that are using their lived experience to help young people seek services and support like mental health or behavioral health services. In other facets, that is caregivers that work directly with young people accessing these services, right? And so helping them navigate the system, understand the language, and really be in this space of, I'm coming to ask for support. And so how can I make this a brave space so we can have an intentional conversation around what you need and get you there, right? And so a lot of times, our caregivers allow us to do that.
Okay, first of all, I have to acknowledge the t-shirts and say that they're amazing. And also, I love that you guys are going first because you're just gonna leave glitter on the stage for everyone else. I love that. So watching the video is really inspiring. You guys have clearly done a ton since you started the program and made a ton of progress. So my question is about where do you see this going next? How does it grow within the community? What's next for you guys?
Honestly, it's been inspiring because when we started the project, we understood that there was a need for training and resources for caregivers that are working with youth that have been impacted by child welfare. But as we continue to move forward, it's constantly evolved. Our partnerships, our abilities to connect with different organizations. We've had people from out of state reach out. So I really feel that this particular training is something it's here. It's gonna be here, and our goal is to keep improving and building on it, but making sure that it's getting into the hands of those caregivers that need it and they want it.
You mentioned you have interest from people out of state. Do you feel like the program that you've built is something that's scalable in that way, that you could sort of package it and let other groups around the country use it?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes we can. But I will say, when I started this, it was about a personal connect for me. Growing up in foster care, moving around, changing placements, and then when working with the youth that I'm working with now, they're having a lot of the same similar experiences. And so what we know is that permanent placements are not always permanent, and I will note that youth change placements so often. It's so important that anyone that's working with youth have this information. So the need is there. And I mean, Oklahoma is always a great start, and we get it right when we do this. And that's something I've learned. I'm really proud to be a part of this cohort, this program. But other states need it.
I love that, and the ability for a group in Oklahoma to sort of be the thought leader there and be able to share that broadly is really exciting. Thank you.
Well, that's my plug for Honestly. I want to shout out to all the staff. Thank y'all.
Right. What do you need to make sure that the project keeps going?
The first thing is just more community partners, really having their voices at the beginning in the forefront of everything we're doing and working with them, making sure that our curriculum is available. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say money. We all work in the nonprofit sector to some capacity. We're here to provide a service and help. So financial support is always a bonus.
Okay, so how can people who are really interested in what you're doing and the work you're doing, how can they find you and how can they get connected with you?
So our website is bncglobal.org. We are on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we follow back. But ultimately, we're here, and if you need us, we'll be available.
All right, I think that's all we have for BNC. Everybody give them a big round of applause.
Thank you, Brondalyn and Timber. You are doing amazing work, and we're grateful to you for starting us off. Hello, my name is Rachel Eskridge. I serve as the Director of Community Engagement at YWCA Oklahoma City. We replicated a curriculum for caregivers of youth experiencing crisis called Braving the Talk. Now, Braving the Talk was created in year 1 by Sisu and Dr. Wright, and then it was continued in year 2 and 3 by Honestly.
Oklahoma works to build an Oklahoma where all 2S LGBTQ+ people have the safety to thrive. It often includes advocacy, public education, coalition building, and empowerment in the civic process.
A lot of people don't always realize that we actually do community building events as well as trying to support individuals, especially young people. But we serve all ages, helping them do community engagement. We focus a lot on the civic process in general, so we really want to show up for them as best we can so that they can enact the things that they want within their own communities. Our particular innovation is actually called Liberate. We've created a website where you can engage with inclusive, evidence-based, accurate sexual health information and education. Our goal is to really try to give caregivers the opportunity to, learn some things that they may not know, but also to unlearn some things that they have learned in their own sexual health education.
We found that a lot of caregivers we spoke to never received sex ed that was evidence-based or inclusive to their identities and their experiences. So now as adults, they want to do better for the youth in their lives. They know they can do better, but they don't always know where or how to start. Through Liberate, we want to help caregivers process that information on their own time and without having to stress about the reliability of tech-based resources. So that inspired us to take an innovative approach to a standard resource hub that starts with a self-assessment questionnaire or an SAQ, which yields tailored content to fit their needs based off of the resources we've created in the hub. We created Liberate so caregivers can experience freedom from what held them back in their own sexual health education. That way they can be liberated and available to navigate sexual health with the youth in their lives now.
I think one of my favorite things about SPARK Innovation OKC was having the opportunity to actually prioritize inclusive sexual health in Oklahoma, but then to be able to have the means and the capacity to sit down and create this project is just a complete game changer.
And something that we learned from the human-centered design process was that you can't always make assumptions about people's needs, even when you have the best intentions. So it's always good to be precise and get people's input on things.
We've had organizations that are youth-based. We've had organizations that are sexual health-based. We've had organizations that specifically serve the disabled community, that specifically serve immigrant communities, that specifically serve POC communities. We've just had such an overwhelming opportunity to make sure that this is a resource that's going to serve everyone in the 2S LGBTQ+ community, and that includes allies. And so just seeing how we have all come together and made something, so beautiful and so needed within our larger community, I will forever be grateful for that.
Freedom Oklahoma is a statewide advocacy organization that works to secure lived equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, two-spirit, and queer people through advocacy, public education, coalition building, and empowerment in civic process. Joining us now are Taylor Ray and Matea Blackwell with Freedom Oklahoma and our incredible panelists. Ronell, let's have you start this time.
Hi, welcome y'all. So tell us a little bit about how your community has changed since you developed your innovation.
Absolutely. So our community has changed in that I feel like we've really been able to focus on the unity part of community, having the opportunity to speak to so many different organizations from all different age ranges, from youth to elders, and touching on all different sorts of identities within the 2S LGBTQ+ community has really just brought us together stronger around sexual health and education. So I think that that's how we've changed for sure.
Oh, I'll add something. Yeah, so our project is is an as needed tool. So it's kind of hard to tell, but I know every time we kind of show this project to caregivers and they engage with it, there's lots of hope and relief that comes afterwards, because we are not a direct service organization, nor are we a sexual health-based organization. So our tool is something that is actually can be protected from attempts at censorship. So it's been really cool. And caregivers have named feeling like lots of relief that they know that this is a tool that isn't going anywhere, like with everything going on right now.
Cool. I'm going to go out of order a little bit, Tyler, sorry. But I heard one thing in the video that I wanted to like double click on. So you mentioned one of the things you learned from human-centered design is that you can't always trust your assumptions about what people want or how they want to interact with you or your information. Can you dive in a little bit about that? Like, so what are some examples of things you learned that were maybe counterintuitive or not what you would have assumed if you hadn't, been deeply understanding your users?
Yeah, I can't think of a specific example right now, but I know like for us being a part of the community that we work with, it's really easy to kind of assume needs and assume what people are like wanting out of this project. So sometimes we would just get feedback and it would be not like shocking or anything, but not stuff we thought about. And I don't know, like it was just like interesting how diverse our community is, especially around topics of sexual health and their experiences. So maybe one thing was like religion. So our staff isn't a religious staff, and there's lots of harm around religion in the queer and trans community. So it was interesting sometimes whenever people would come to us and they were faith-based or they had a faith practice. It was something that kind of challenged us a bit. And having to think about that angle when building content or building resources, if that makes sense.
I think another thing that we were surprised by is that the struggles that we're seeing from allied caregivers and 2S LGBTQ+ caregivers were the same. And I think part of us probably assumed that it would vary, but it was really that they're overwhelmed by the process. They don't know where to find the right information. They don't want to give the wrong information. They don't know what is valid and what is not, what is evidence-based, what is not. And being able to really find a place to start was where we started. Yeah.
I remember when you guys sort of came across the insight of this idea that your caregivers may need to unlearn things before they can go teach others, and that being sort of surprising and a big pivot that really informed the direction of the project. So thanks for diving in on that.
Yeah, building off that, can you tell us a little bit about who your focus caregivers are and why you thought it was important to reach out to that population?
Yeah, so our caregivers, it's really similar to SPARK in that there's an opportunity everywhere for a caregiver. It would be natural to say that our caregivers would be 2S LGBTQ+, but it's even wider than that, and the age range is wider than that because you could be someone who doesn't identify as part of the 2S LGBTQ+ community and still need that information to be able to provide to the youth that are in your life or your peers that are in your life. And even if your young person is not 2S LGBTQ+ identified, that doesn't mean that their peer support group or the people that they're interacting with daily don't need that information either. Maybe they need to know it for their friends because they don't have an adult in their lives willing to have those conversations. So there isn't one pinpointed caregiver, but obviously we're really wanting to center the 2S LGBTQ+ experience in that.
Okay, so how do you see Liberate growing in our community? Where do you kind of see the trajectory of this project?
Yeah, so we actually have a lot of plans, some that we have thought about from the very beginning. So we would love to turn the website into an app one day that would be available offline after download. We also really want this to be like a community project. We want to bring community-based organizations, groups, professionals, and have them like house their resources on the hub, but also create content for the hub and kind of be a symbol of all the people in Oklahoma who are doing this work. We wanted it to showcase that. So along with translated versions of the website, better accessibility, things like that.
So you talked a little bit about your dream for the future for your project. What are some of the things that you need to keep it going?
So we definitely need UX UI support because we are not web developers. We created a website and we're just hoping for the best. So we want to get it audited so it's actually usable, along with translators so we can get more translated versions of the website. And yeah, community partnerships and have people connected and plugged into the actual work we're doing.
Definitely want to lean into the community aspect of that too, knowing that we are not the experts. We want to make sure that everyone has the ability to inform the project, so making sure that we continue to make those community connections across the state.
Okay, flashing back to the very beginning when you applied for SPARK, what were some of the problems that your organization had identified that made you want to apply? And then looking back now, do you feel like you have made headway on solving some of those problems?
Yeah, so something going into this project, we knew that 2S LGBTQ+ people do not often have access to sexual health education alone, but also sexual health education that's inclusive of their identities and their experiences. So we were really excited to create something that not only considered queer and trans experiences, but actually put them at the forefront of it and kept them in mind throughout the entire process. So nothing would ever feel like an add-on or anything like that. So that was a big need that we wanted to address.
And I think it also goes back to what Mateo was saying in that we wanted to make sure that there was a resource available, especially in Oklahoma, knowing the legislation that's happened, us being an organization that focuses on civic process and focuses on legislative advocacy. We wanted to make sure there was that resource available that was evidence-based, that talks about sexual health from all aspects, not one. So that was another big reason, and I think we've worked pretty hard to make sure that it is accessible to everyone.
Great. How can folks who are interested in Liberate learn more or support you?
That's an excellent question. You can go to freedomoklahoma.org/liberate. That is actually our project as it is right now. We're actually in the process of creating some stickers that Matea has put together. So it has a QR code, so it'll be super accessible. And we're also working right now to try to find ways to create content that are in other languages. So hopefully we will have Spanish up shortly, and then we're going to also be working on Vietnamese, Hmong, and possibly simplified Mandarin. So we're really trying to find ways to make that accessible. But yeah, we're also on social media. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, we're there. LinkedIn, wow, LinkedIn. So
Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you so much, Matea and Taylor, for providing tailored, reliable, and inclusive sexual health information to our community. Next up, we have the Down Syndrome Association of Central Oklahoma. DASCO's mission is to raise awareness and provide resources as well as promote acceptance and inclusion for people with Down syndrome. Let's learn a little bit more about their project.
We're part of the Down Syndrome Association of Central Oklahoma. Our mission is to raise awareness and provide resources as well as promote acceptance and inclusion for people with Down syndrome. We do that through a variety of different programs, activities, and events, all to benefit our families, which we serve about 1,000 in the Oklahoma City metro area.
If I could sum up DASCO's self-advocacy program for my son and our family, it would be life-changing.
So my favorite thing about the SPARK Innovation Grant has definitely been getting to know Honestly and their team and working with them.
SPARK has allowed us to be able to provide some real-world opportunities for our individuals to learn ways to help protect themselves.
Our innovation is designing a toolkit for individuals with Down syndrome to learn more about personal hygiene, how to take care of themselves, and relationships.
It's given him an opportunity to mingle more with the opposite sex or even with the same sex, you know, to know the difference and to know how to approach each person.
A lot of caregivers think, I don't need to talk to my loved one about sex necessarily. But as we found out, individuals with Down syndrome have the same wants, desires, and needs, and they're curious.
The more independence that our children get, the better our quality of life is, as well as hers.
We've utilized the human-centered design process in all of our ideas because it's such a great tool to utilize.
We have had individuals that have had so much success and growth. If we had not had this grant and this opportunity, these caregivers would be lost, confused, stuck in the same situation that they're in.
Boundaries are hard for individuals like our daughter, and we need to know that she's safe out there.
So the feedback from the caregivers has been a resounding, this is incredible, this is filling the gap. It's definitely starting very difficult conversations that in the past caregivers have been stumped on how to start those conversations and continue those conversations.
Having something to go to that actually has those topics broken down and then the resources for us to use to continue those conversations, it's like the easy button, where it was difficult before because unless something happened, a lot of times you didn't know where to start or what to talk about.
My hope is that individuals who aren't in the disability world are able to see that these types of things are necessary and recognize that these individuals just want to connect with other people.
All right, joining us now are Riley Cole and Sarah Soul with the Down Syndrome Association of Central Oklahoma. Susan, will you start us off with a question this time?
Absolutely. So we got a little bit of a snapshot of this from the video, but can you tell us overall, like, what does your organization do and focus on? And then in that process, what were the problems you identified that made you want to apply for SPARK?
So we serve about 1,000 families in the central Oklahoma area, and we're here to provide resources and promote acceptance and inclusion like our mission statement, but most importantly, we're supporting the family from prenatal diagnosis all the way through the lifespan. So we're not giving up. And it's even beyond that because we have siblings that will become caregivers long after we're gone. So we're just here as a resource to families, but we're also a resource to our other caregivers that we see as therapists, medical professionals in those outreach areas.
And in the work that you do, were there specific problems related to sexual health training, or I think in the video you mentioned you're wanting your kids to really be protective that made you think we should apply for this and come up with some solutions for this problem?
So during this process, we realized that our individuals entering the workforce, it's really scary because we found that more than 50% of individuals with IDD are sexually assaulted in the workforce. And for a caregiver, I don't want to send my daughter out into the workforce if she has the potential of being touched inappropriately. So really the whole basis for this was to teach caregivers how to have those conversations, but most importantly for our individuals to be protected and safe, because sometimes they can't always defend themselves. And we want to set up those boundaries so they know what they are to protect themselves. And that's really what kind of started the whole process of us applying for the grant.
That's great, hugely impactful, thank you.
We've had the opportunity to talk a little bit about applying human-centered design and work beyond SPARK. Would you be willing to share with us some of the things that you've learned and have started to apply?
Yeah, absolutely. So starting out, we sent out a survey to our caregivers with 27 topics and had them categorize them from one being the most important to 27 being the least important. And we were really shocked by those results. So essentially, personal hygiene was #1 on the list. That was really shocking and not something we expected. Relationships was #2, and the basics to puberty were #3. And so from that, we were like, oh gosh, this is not what we thought it was going to be at all. So we scrapped everything that we went in thinking and really started getting into these topics, talking to caregivers and starting from the beginning to figure out, well, what exactly in these topics do they want us to focus on? What information are they having a difficult time communicating to their self-advocate or their individual who has Down syndrome? And from there, building our toolkit.
You've built a really cool toolkit for your caregiver, starting with, it starts with like hand washing and body autonomy and things like that, and building through. Tell us about how your caregiver's response to that. Tell us your caregivers, who they are, and how you're working with them.
So I'm a caregiver, and I think I can speak to this. We started out with the basics because we realized the individuals weren't learning the basics, and they're not taught these things in school. So it's all based on the caregivers. And the caregivers, we're tired. This is a day in, day out job. This is going to be for the rest of my life, and it's going to be my oldest daughter's caregiver life. So what do I need to do in order to put great resources in place so that she's protected, so that she's safe, so she can take care of herself, that somebody else isn't having to do all these things for her? So I think that's kind of where it started. And as a result, we divulge into some more, deeper topics, but our caregivers really just didn't know where to find the resources. So that's really what the toolkit was. It was putting all these resources that we found together. So we used a lot of visual aids, we used a lot of videos, and keep in mind the toolkit is really designed for a 3rd grade level reading. So even the individuals can use the toolkit independently, but it's really designed as a partnership with the caregiver and the individual. Riley?
Yeah, so my sister has Down syndrome, so as a potential future caregiver, I went at this from Sarah's perspective as a caregiver, but then my perspective as a future caregiver. What do I want my sister to have down so that I'm not focusing on those things and I can focus on being more her sister than a parent. That's not my goal in her future, to be her parent, because we've grown up as sisters and I want to be able to keep that relationship. But at the same time, I also understand that as a caretaker, it's my responsibility to ensure that she knows these things and she keeps being reminded of these things, so that she can protect herself, but then also she goes out in the world with this knowledge so that she can forge a path and get in life what she wants.
Awesome. This is a really important project. How do you see it growing in your community and maybe even beyond?
Well, we've already started that process. So there are other affiliates like that across the nation. And we've gone to a conference recently, and they're really excited for us to relinquish this toolkit to them. More importantly, we're hoping that we can modify the toolkit so it can be used in the classroom, and working with special education teachers, that they can actually start talking about certain parts of the chapter and chapters in the toolkit. And that's what's great about the toolkit, is you can use any parts to it that you want. You can take it out. Not everybody wants to discuss certain things that we have in there, but they're there for everyone and for all walks of life. And that's what's really important to us. We wanted it to be very inclusive, a good resource tool, but more importantly, we wanted this to be something that would have a good impact on the caregivers.
Thank you. Building on that a little bit, you mentioned potential use in like a special ed classroom. Do you see use cases for this toolkit for disabilities beyond Down syndrome even?
Absolutely. It could actually be used for people without disabilities, to be honest, because it starts at the basics. Because I think even in the younger generation of children, we need to teach them more about hand washing and personal hygiene and how to take care of our bodies and the functionality of our body parts. And those things aren't being talked about in any level. In people with disabilities, we have the visuals and the tools and the videos there because they're such literal thinkers. They need to see to believe. And so that's what we're hoping, that it'll be easy for special ed teachers to roll that out in the classroom, and they don't have to find things, they don't have to research for things, everything's already modified.
Where can folks look to find out more about your project?
So our website is dsaco.org. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, and we hope to have a link to our toolkit up on the website as soon as we finish a few of our assessments. And then we're going to be rolling it out to anybody that would like it, so they can contact us by email. Our email is info@dsaco.org.
Okay. Thank you so much to Sarah and Riley for all the work you're doing with the Down syndrome community here in Central Oklahoma. Again, we are asking for each organization to tell us how you can get in contact with them, but if for some reason you're missing their contact information, please refer to the contact information on the screen, and we would be glad to get you all in touch with each of the orgs. Okay, so this brings us to our very first break of the day. Whether you're watching the live stream or in the live audience, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We will see you back here at 11:11. Thank you all. All right, welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed a nice 10-minute break. We're going to continue on with Cohort 2 and have the Latino Community Development Agency. LCDA is the trusted community resource and advocate for Hispanic families who often do not have access to services as a result of cultural, language, and socioeconomic disparities. Let's take a look at their project.
My organization is the Latino Community Development Agency. Our mission is to provide and help the Latino community here in the OKC metro area by providing some kind of social service. What we created was a kind of like a Linktree resource, like a digital e-card where people could scan a QR code and have access to a lot of like educational videos, maybe the addresses and our numbers to our clinic. So if they had any questions or how to get, tested, they could easily just access it in a push of a button.
Our purpose is to inform caregivers and young adults about teen pregnancy, sexual health, gender identity, sexual orientation, knowing the difference and knowing that there's resources out here and it's free of cost.
Sexual health is very important. Everybody kind of has a sexuality and that everybody has like a lot of questions. For a lot of us, it's kind of confusing.
People don't want to talk about sexual health, especially the Latino Hispanic community. It's kind of embarrassing to them. It's something that's not talked about growing up.
And there's not a lot of people, unfortunately, in that realm here in Oklahoma that are saying, hey, let's have that conversation in a healthy, safe space in a professional way with families and caregivers.
Without SPARK Innovation OKC, we'd probably be in a harder spot. We'd probably not be able to go to as many outreach events or have an extra employee to help us. For one of us to go to outreach events and reach more people, we obviously need help. The SPARK Innovation program has continued to help us, and I don't know if they know the help that they bring us, but it's humongous.
They helped our caregivers develop a way to have resources for families, their teens, their kids, even family and friends around their age. A lot of the times they don't even have the education themselves to be able to give to their younger ones. So it gives us the opportunity to give them information and be able to educate them.
The stuff they're putting out isn't stuff that's 10 years old, 20 years old. It's trying to be something, more recent.
We're all in this together, so I think that's something that we provide to society and make sure that people know that there's nothing shameful to talk about.
I'd like to thank SPARK for doing what they're doing. Tackling these tough issues is very needed and helpful in our community.
Joining us now from the Latino Community Development Agency are Marco Salas and Samantha Victor. Let's have Brittany start us off this time.
Awesome. Okay, so the first thing I want to know is about your caregivers. Tell us more about your caregivers, how you chose them for this project, and how's that going?
Hello. Oh. So our caregivers are a little bit of everyone. We have people around our age that need that education. We have caregivers that are our age that are educating their younger siblings because their parents don't necessarily want to put that full foot in. I was gonna say we have people that are older than us also that are getting that education for themselves, but as well for their families, friends, a little bit of, I was gonna say, I guess it's a little bit of everyone.
I think we're lucky in that we have like the clinic setting, so we get a lot of people from different ages. I'm surprisingly, we get a lot of like older people that sometimes they don't know a lot about either STDs or sexual health. So it's kind of our jobs to educate, and usually these people are very happy, so they become kind of like regulars at our clinic, and I feel from there it's kind of easy to make them our caregivers.
Great. So tell us a little bit about the problem or the issue that you identified during the human-centered design process and what motivated you to apply for the grant as well.
I think in our community there's a lot of taboos, especially in these like subjects of STDs and sexual health. But I mean, I think our job is always just to educate and promote like a healthy sexual health. And so identifying that problem, we figured that it would probably be best that we get some kind of help from a grant and give us the opportunity to like provide this service for free in our community.
Backing up what he was saying, personally, when I talk about this with my family, my parents are like, we weren't taught this, so we didn't have that education to fully give you. And it's just something that it's embarrassing in a sense for them to talk about, but I tell them like, this is human, it's natural, it's something that we all, in a sense, go through or want to experiment in our life. So it's just something that we need to educate our families and letting them know that the resources are out there. Don't be so scared for it. There's people that you can ask. I mean, we're one of them, but you also have support groups. I was like, there's definitely support groups out there that you can reach out to get those resources from.
So I want to dive a little bit more into the human-centered design process that your organization went through to come up with some of the solutions that you implemented. How did you learn about what your community wanted and needed? And was there anything that surprised you about their willingness to talk about this or how they wanted to implement these solutions?
I think it just kind of comes down to people are people and not just numbers. So I definitely love the human-centered design more than any other kind of research projects that I've done. Just being able to talk to people face to face and kind of learn what they need and what their troubles are. And it's kind of very pragmatic. Some people kind of introduce some problems that we didn't know, I guess we had or thought about because it doesn't happen in our lives. But we kind of noticed that it's very necessary to be able to further educate them and provide the services that we provide.
Yeah, I love that. That was similar to, I think, Freedom Oklahoma's comment, which is like, maybe you're not going into it with the wrong assumptions, but there are just things out there that you don't know that people are thinking about or that they need. So it's great to hear how you went through that process.
Now that you've worked on Hablamos Claro for a year and a half-ish, what do you see the future for the project? Where do you see it going?
We have a lot of plans. I think with we have like this link tree where if people like need kind of like access to certain topics or more information, we can provide that. I would really like to see us work with other nonprofits where we can provide like more services for people, because there's like other like issues that I think people come to our clinic and it kind of like feels bad that we're not able to provide. So I kind of, just kind of work with other nonprofits so we can provide those links and just kind of get people what they want.
So what do you need to keep the project going? Beyond Spark, what kind of resources, what are you looking for? How will you support this?
We're just kind of looking for maybe more groups to work with, maybe more topics to educate people on, and that just kind of comes with time. Me and Samantha are fairly new to the project, so we kind of got thrown in kind of midway, so we didn't have like a say on how it's gonna like start. But I feel like being here, we've kind of gained some experience. We've become more educators in our community and just the people we've been able to influence. So probably just providing more resources to people and being able to educate them in more ways.
Awesome. So how do you see the project growing in your community, and do you see it growing beyond your organization?
Yeah, I think we are constantly doing outreach. We're constantly putting our card out there for people to reach us and find out about us. And we're just always happy to be able to reach new demographics, even outside our community. Personally, I mean, I like going to certain places like shows, rock shows, and like giving out our cards for people to come try out, like get tested. I think that's the important part too, is that I think our goal is to get people tested and find out, if there's HIV in our population and get them the treatment that they need. That's always been like our important goal, and then obviously to educate anybody that just kind of has any questions.
I'm interested to know that since you launched some of these products and the link tree and all of that good stuff, what kind of feedback have you received from your community members?
We have like a survey at the end, and people are always, they're always grateful. And usually like what they tell us face to face, like I've had a lot of people tell us that they didn't know such things existed and that they're glad that it's provided free for them. Because I think that's the big issue. A lot of people come to our clinics, they're worried about the price, they're kind of already kind of embarrassed to be there. But I feel like once they leave pretty relieved and pretty like hopeful that we're able to provide things for them and that it's going to be okay.
So do you have thoughts on, maybe this is part of growing the grant, you understand that it's hard to get people in the door, but once they're there, they feel really grateful and relieved, some of the words you used. So how do you get more people in the door?
Just doing as much outreach as we can. We've just been providing a lot of like condoms with our cards at different bars and different events. We also just putting flyers wherever we can and just like tabling, just like anywhere to get people to, just like know that we exist and that this service is provided for them free of cost.
I just tell people that come in to tell their friends. I'm like, tell your friends, tell your family. I'm like, if you feel like they need the education or they don't fully are equipped with it, I tell them, invite them, bring them in. I'm like, we try to have an open, safe space is what I tell everyone that comes in. I'm like, if you just want to sit and chit chat, I'm here to just chit chat with you if that's what you want to do. So just pulling them in, telling them that we're here to listen. We see you guys, and yeah.
All right, if folks are interested in learning more about Hablemos Claro or helping out, where should they go for that information?
Us on our Facebook page called the Latino Agency, or on our website, it's lcdaokc.org.
All right, well, thank you so much, Sam and Marco, for sharing your vision with us. Hello, everyone. My name is Donnell Cole. I am the co-founder and author of nonprofit Modern Manhood Foundation. Modern Manhood had the opportunity to replicate Freedom City's SHIFT program, which you will get to hear about after lunch. I'm given the opportunity to be able to introduce the Progressive Oklahoma Baptist State Convention, which is here to serve as a collection of churches who work together to advance the kingdom of God throughout the state of Oklahoma, and here is their project.
Our organization is the Progressive Oklahoma Baptist State Convention, or POBSC. We are a collection of statewide churches, most of them located here in Oklahoma City, that work together to advance the kingdom of God. Our project is Sex in the Church Basement. We knew that we needed something that would provide pause to our audiences. And so when you have a church full of people and you're saying sex in the church basement, one of the things I can guarantee you is they're listening. It's like, wait, what was that?
In a 2,000-year institution, right, that being the church, often the concept of innovation is in direct odds with the way a church would operate. And so SPARK Innovation has kind of forced us to think, how can we be innovative?
There are a lot of things that we think of that we think should happen, you know, in and around the church space. What SPARK Innovation has done is given us an opportunity to really drill down and explore that.
We created a workbook. These kids these days, it is to bridge a generational disconnect between caregivers and the rising generation. And what we found in the first part of the human-centered design process is that our caregivers, they love working with the kids. They just don't always understand them.
They know them in the space of, you know, the youth I serve here at church. But what they didn't know was what kinds of things do they enjoy? What are the best ways that they receive information? What are the songs they like? What are the TV shows they're following? What are the social media channels they're following? The single most important thing that any of us can do for one another is to see. When you feel seen by somebody, then you're able to show up as your best self, your most authentic self.
What we have learned is that they were going into Bible studies, they were going into small groups, they were going into grow groups, just taking shots in the dark, hoping that something they would say would in some kind of way connect with the students. But now that they have a tool and a resource to do some research before it's time to go into those spaces, they feel a little bit more empowered to establish genuine relationships with the students that they're serving.
Collectively, they all felt like, finally, you know, what a relief, finally. Someone in the church space is taking on these conversations. It is a calling to be able to work with children and youth and to serve as a part of their tribe in ushering them safely and well-equipped into adulthood.
All right, joining us now are Vivian Tyson and Dejan Jones with POBSC. Tyler, will you start us off?
Sure. Can you tell us a little bit about POBSC, the work that you do, and what was the issue that led you to apply for SPARK?
Sure. We're so glad to be a part of this entire grant initiative. When we first read about the grant, the first thing we thought was, you know, a grant that's talking about youth sexual health and all of that, that's a conversation that the church needs to be at the table. You know, quintessentially, the church is always thought of as the, you know, while it's supposed to be the safe place, the place of love, the place of acceptance, what typically happens is when you hear spiritual, and as we talk about development, emotional, physical, and all of that, we also have to talk about spiritual development. But when people think spiritual development, they instinctively think religion. And we want it to be a part of the conversation that caused that thought process, instead of it being religion, for it to be relationship. And so we went to our leadership. We told them about this grant and said, you know, this is really what we want to do. And as you can imagine, their first response was, abstinence only has to be the line that we toe. And so the question we asked first was, okay, we'll do that. Is that what we all did? And you could hear a pin drop. And trust me, among a group of pastors, hearing a pin drop is a really big deal. And so from that, they began to realize that maybe we need to do something different. And so we wanted to be a part of a conversation that said, abstinence only education promoted as fear is not only wrong, but it's not God's intention. So when we had an opportunity to insist that the church be represented at the table for this conversation, because we recognize God's word is good for it. You know, the Bible says, I didn't give you a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And so we wanted to be involved, and we were delighted to be selected.
Thank you for all of that. So The human-centered design process is not easy. It's kind of, it's challenging for everybody, I think, as we first started on this grant and started working on what is this like. So tell us about what that was like for you, and how you got to where you are using that process.
Right. So it was an interesting experience. I think because our team is comprised of, like, on the DISC assessment, we're all Ds. We all range on the color red. We are all INTJs. So if y'all know what that means, we all have like our very own specific ideas of how things are supposed to be. So we came into the project like, oh yeah, this is what we're going to do. This is going to work, and this is how it's going to play out. But it caused us to kind of really step back and take and listen to our caregivers in a really intense way to ensure that the things that our big personalities thought was needed was actually something that they could use and something that they could want, that they would want. We had like a lot of age diversity on our team as well, and so we had to kind of just listen to see what would be the best way to deploy and execute like our project and things of that nature. So it gave us the freedom, right, to mess up. You know, I think with our types of personalities, we think that we have to get it right and get it right the first time. But the human-centered design process gave us the space to, brain map and just really continue to think about different innovations and different ways to solve a common problem. So, and now it's kind of at the root of how we innovate in our church, not just for this space, but in every different type of, like, now what we're calling like ministry innovation. So.
Awesome. So every team got the opportunity to define caregivers for themselves. Tell us a little bit about how you defined caregivers and why it's important that they were the focus of your project.
Right. So our caregivers, it's specific folks who work with kids in the church space. So the definitions for us, it would be like youth pastors, youth directors, youth directress, mentors, and student volunteers. So anyone who has any type of interaction, more specifically, maybe not on the fine arts side, but with things like life groups and grow groups. So within New Hope's context, whenever we meet for Wednesday night grow groups with the kids every Wednesday, the folks who are engaging with them in that space, or the folks that are engaging with our kids during girls ministry or boys to men, the ones that kind of have that more interpersonal dynamic with our students, and then even just the ones that are providing like leadership for our churches. One of the things that we found in the human-centered design process with the listening sessions is that it also has to come from leadership as well, but we'll probably get into that a little bit later.
So Tyler asked what were sort of the problems that you identified that made you want to do this, and you talked about sort of just wanting, more conversations around sexual health in the church. One thing I think was really interesting was that one of the problems that you ended up addressing was sort of this sub-problem, which was people need these better relationships, and we need to help bridge the educational gap before people are comfortable talking about that. So talk a little bit about how you got to that sub-problem and what kind of feedback you're getting on, is that working? Like, is that creating the better relationships and people are now more comfortable to talk about this? How's that all going?
Sure. Like Vivian said, we began this with an internal team throughout our statewide network, and we thought we knew, that this is the way we're going to move forward. What we gathered from our caregivers early on was that they felt uncomfortable not only having conversations of a sexual nature with our youth, but they didn't feel like the relationships that they had with the youth were robust. And in talking to them and surveying with them, we recognized that they had some lingering hurt too from when they were youth in the church themselves, and how their pathway to their sexual development happened. And so we realized that we had some infrastructure work to do. That's how we ended up with kind of the development of a sub-project in the These Kids These Days workbook. We wanted to be able to teach caregivers how to have real and sustainable relationships with the youth that they serve, so that as those youth began to enter those very formative and developmental years, that they would bring those conversations to the adults that they already trusted. And so it was going to be very important that we help them build those relationships, as well as build hierarchy within the church for how this exposure and transparency can happen, because it really was all about transparency.
One other thing to that note, we did an unofficial, so we did not officially survey children because that's illegal. But we did a listening session. We found that out in this process too. But we did a listening session with the kids where we just asked like some questions. And what we found is that the kids were actually just as awkward about talking about things outside of Jonah, Moses, and Abraham to their youth workers as the youth workers were for them. We asked the question to the kids, what conversation is off of the table as it relates to grow groups or Wednesday night ministry? And they said, we're not talking to y'all about sex. We have no interest in talking to our youth workers about that. And that was just in direct conflict with what we feel like the church is supposed to be there for. So
I just have another question, just so I make sure everybody understands, because I know I didn't understand in the beginning. POBSC is not one organization. Right. So talk to us a little bit about your reach and how many churches you're actually working with on this project.
Great, yes. The POBSC, we are a collection of churches statewide. We have, there are about 24 of us now that comprise the state network. We are connected to the Progressive National Baptist Convention. And so we also, besides our state affiliation, we have a regional and a national affiliation. We've already begun, we just finished up our state annual session, and we're preparing for our regional in Las Vegas. Well, what happens in Vegas will not stay in Vegas, because we will in fact be sharing with the regional churches about this new project, and we are looking forward to launching it not just regionally but nationally as well.
All right, so I asked about the problems, but now I want to hear about the good stuff. What have you seen change within the church since you've started implementing this?
So two things, and the first thing kind of echoes the other members of the cohort. There's just a sign of relief. Our caregivers are now going into their youth spaces like saying, okay, well, I'm at least comfortable to ask a question about like their culture and the things that they're interested in. They understand now that I don't necessarily have to like the culture, but I at least have to understand it and have like some level of respect for what's going on in with these kids in their world. But the second thing I think that we have found is that our caregivers, and like from an infrastructure standpoint, they're more willing to give feedback now. I think one of the things that we saw in our check-in spaces was like our spaces, they're just not used to being asked, is this working? I think we're kind of in a space where it's like, this is what we're going to do, and then we do it. But I have seen like a really big space of growth as it relates to like feedback culture, which is kind of trickling into some other areas of our churches as well. So that's been something that's changed, I think, for the better.
I absolutely do not want to leave out that one of our pastors and a senior executive throughout our convention asked us, so I need some information about pronouns. What do I do with this LGBTQRSTUV? I need some help about pronouns. And even though he didn't get all of that right, the point is that the leadership is open and they're asking questions and they're looking for training and turning to the convention for it. And we're going to be there to provide it.
So how can people get involved if they're more interested in what you're doing, they want to learn more? Where should we point them?
That's me. They can follow us on Facebook, POBSC, and they can also find our website, pobsc.org. We do have a TikTok. We're engaging the young adults to teach us how to use it. And so, but yes, they can find us in those places.
Thank you so much to Jean and Vivian for bringing sexual health information and connection with youth to the historically Black church. Last but certainly not least, the final organization of our second cohort, the Oklahoma Autism Center in the section of Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics at the OU Health Sciences Center. The section of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics is housed within the Department of Pediatrics at OU and is home to diverse programs to benefit children and adolescents in need of specialized medical and behavioral health services. Let's take a look at the project they've created.
Our organization is the Oklahoma Autism Center, and we are a part of the University of Oklahoma's section on developmental and behavioral pediatrics.
The overall mission is to support the overall well-being and development of autistic youth and youth with similar intellectual or developmental disabilities, as well as supporting their families and caregivers.
And provide professional development and resources that can really help meet the needs of individuals with autism.
Caregivers in our area had come and talked to us about how the youth in their lives were less likely to receive sexual health education in public school settings. What we were seeing more than anything was the resources available for youth with autism weren't necessarily tailored to their unique learning needs and how they take in information. And so caregivers just wanted resources that were interactive, that were engaging, and that were more than just sitting down and reading a book together.
Our innovation is Atlas, an educational app, autistic teens learning about sexuality.
And it's an app-based sexual education resource that's specifically designed to equip caregivers of autistic youth on how to have effective conversations with autistic youth. And it takes into account the specific experiences that autistic youth might have during things like puberty and some of the unique learning needs that they have that may not be covered in more traditional sexual health curriculum, things like understanding different types of relationships, sensory processing experiences.
So I work closely with children with autism and felt really fortunate to have the opportunity to kind of go through this app while it's been in development. Really breaks things down in a way that to me seems really good for the audience, both the parents themselves and the other caregivers and the individuals with autism.
And what's been unique about SPARK Innovation OKC is each little incremental step of the process. We've had caregiver feedback and involvement.
They've let us know that they really enjoy the parts of the app that are interactive. So things like videos or audio and a lot of the activities that can be really engaging for autistic youth and help them actually take what they're learning and then apply it.
I mean, I think this program addresses a need that really I haven't seen addressed very much at all. So I'm excited to see something kind of tackling an important but underserved issue.
SPARK Innovation OKC has taught me that there is a community here who has similar values as ours, who has similar goals in providing the needed supports in addressing difficult topics and really empowering caregivers to be able to support youth from all different kinds of groups. I know the teams that we've worked with kind of support youth from all different areas, and to really see that we're not alone in being able to advocate for this need for the people that we serve.
Joining us now are Jay Capretto and Gail Han with the Oklahoma Autism Center. Susan, let's have you start us off.
All right, we'll start like we've started with a lot of other groups. Tell us just a little bit more about the center, the work you typically do, and how you came across the problem that led you to apply for the grant.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the Oklahoma Autism Center, we provide a lot of different services and supports, some direct intervention services with individuals with autism, but also supporting families and caregivers. We also work to promote inclusivity and accessibility across other organizations within Oklahoma so that they can also learn how to provide effective and inclusive services for individuals with autism and different learning needs.
And then a little bit more about why this was a problem you decided to apply for this grant to solve.
Yeah, one of the problems that we realized through both speaking with caregivers and then also through some of the research that we've done is that individuals with autism are not either provided with the same types of opportunities to learn about sexual health, and that if they are, it's maybe not provided in a way that is easy for them to learn about or that addresses some of the unique learning needs that they have. And so caregivers often fall into the role of really providing that sexual health education. And many caregivers feel like they don't have the kinds of resources that they need to know how to talk about these things or how to effectively provide this type of education. And so we really wanted to focus on that, supporting caregivers in learning or feeling more effective and confident.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with human-centered design and what some key key takeaways were for your project?
Absolutely. I think something that was special about the human-centered design process is that it allowed us to talk to a really wide variety of caregivers within both the autistic and autism community, including autistic parents themselves, autistic mentors, but then our caregiver population was defined really broadly. You know, we included providers within our organization, we included all family members, and as well as other just supportive adults such as teachers and peers. And I think what I like the most about the human-centered design process is that from start to finish, we got to really use that input. So from the moment we created this idea, we got impact for each little step of the way, and that really centered caregivers in what we created.
Okay, so how do you see your project growing in our community?
Great question. We definitely want to continue developing this resource. There are many more topics that we hope to include, and that's one of the big pieces of feedback we've gotten from caregivers, is that they're really excited about what we've made so far, but they want more, and we feel the same way. So we hope to continue developing it and expanding the resource that we've created so far. We also hope it's a resource that caregivers, and as Gail mentioned, caregivers for us is defined pretty broadly, whether it's family members, supportive adults, providers, they believe in it, they feel confident in it and recommending it to others through word of mouth or through other organizations. So we hope it's something that is known within the different populations and areas and is talked about as a resource that people feel comfortable going to.
So you've given us a great vision for where you see your project growing for the future. What are some of the things that you need in order to continue that growth?
I think we would love to have this resource continue to have a lot of community input and feedback from all of the different caregivers we've worked with so far. And I think, you know, developing an app is a really involved process. And so far we have, you know, just the very basic start to what I think we would like our final product to be. So just continuing to work with UX designers and software developers to expand upon what we've already done, I think will be really an important next step for us.
Yeah, I want to double click on that because I think a lot of people out here are wondering, like, so once you did all the human-centered design, you knew what you wanted to build, like all the content of the app was informed by you guys and the conversations that you had. How did you build it? Where did those resources come from? Like, what were the connections? Like, did you learn to code?
Oh my goodness, that is a huge question. We learned so much through this process, and I think that's been one of the really helpful things about the human-centered design is that the freedom to really explore and try different things out and to not have the pressure to have like the right exact answer and format right away. So we really started with like what we felt comfortable with was just the content and just getting the content down. And then we were really focusing on, well, how can we take this as like a written word format and translate it into something that's more interactive and more accessible and something where people can have some flexibility and freedom to choose different formats of education, whether it's visual or through an activity or a video or listening to audio that they learn best. And so that's kind of been a little bit of our process of moving from just written word to creating some videos and audio recordings and then finding different ways to fit them together. We have not learned how to code, but we have had some exciting developments in being able to work with some app designers who are actually starting to take some of the information that we put together and actually put it into more of like the next step of the app process. And we've learned that there are a lot of steps in the process, but we are excited about moving forward.
So what stage is the app now? Like, do you have designs that are ready to code? Do you have like a usable beta version?
We've gone through multiple prototypes. The first prototype we had was actually in a PowerPoint format, and then we transferred the PowerPoint prototype to a website. And now we have partnered with app designer who's now put it into kind of like a, oh my gosh, I don't even know the correct terminology, but a really basic app-looking prototype. And so our next step will be working with software developers to transfer it from the design to something that is coded. So we haven't even gotten to a fully functional app yet, but we're so close.
Well, what I love about that is that you probably learned things from each, like even the PowerPoint version, you probably learned things that you wanted to change, whereas if you had gone straight to the coders, you would have spent a lot of money only to come back and want to make changes.
Absolutely, and I think we've all just been really grateful in hearing the feedback. So we, of course, have surveys that are integrated in our intervention process of gathering feedback, but a lot of caregivers have gone above and beyond and just reached out to us directly and have said, I have more feedback I want to give you, things I'm excited about, suggestions that I have that didn't quite fit into the survey we designed. And so a lot of people are very invested in this process, and that's exciting for us. So yes, I don't think we would have had the flexibility to really tailor and adjust things along the way if we had just been able to jump straight into the app at the end.
That's great. Thanks for sharing some insight into the process.
So what are some changes that you see in the community since you've started implementing this and getting this into the hands of different caregivers?
Yeah, great question. One of the things that really, I think, struck me at the beginning of this process was conducting just one-on-one interviews with some caregivers and being surprised. I mean, we knew that this was a problem we wanted to address, but that for a lot of caregivers, talking about sexual health and in a more kind of proactive way, so not just addressing issues or problems as they come up, but really thinking about talking about sexual health as a way of supporting overall development and well-being and health and autonomy in autistic youth. And that was something that didn't seem to be on the radar for a lot of the caregivers we've talked about. And so I think through this process, we've seen that conversation shift and really not just being more aware that this is something that's important for everyone, but how can we actually have these conversations? What are the actual steps and resources that are available or in process to help support us along the way? And so we've definitely seen those conversations develop in exciting ways.
So how can people get involved if they're interested in your project? Where should we send them? Where do they need to check you out at?
Yeah. If you're interested in learning more, definitely email us. The Oklahoma Autism Center website, I believe, is autismcenterok.org, so you can find us there, and we would love to talk to you.
Thank you, Gail and Jay, for the innovative app for caregivers of youth with autism and for sharing that with us today. I hope you all are as excited and energized by hearing about these incredible projects as we are. We are now going to give away our second prize. So same thing, we've still got that great t-shirt and card deck from our keynote speaker. Congratulations to our winner, Katrina Cantrell. Be sure to stay with us as we will have two more drawings actually during our time together. So now we are going to move into taking our lunch break. And because we are doing so well on time, we're going to take a little bit longer lunch break, and we will see you back here at 12:40. The live stream for those of you viewing at home will stay on, so feel free to keep it on while you take your lunch. I think there's going to be some great music being played for you all. After lunch, like I said, we'll have two more giveaways. We'll hear from Cohort 1 and hear from our amazing keynote, Dr. Tanya Bass. We look forward to seeing you back here at 12:40. All right, welcome back, and thank you for joining us. We are going to begin this afternoon with a Spark Tank overview video. As I stated in the beginning, SPARK Innovation is a 3-year grant that ends June 30th. We wanted to share a video with you that will give you a sense of all we have accomplished together in the last 3 years. After our video, we will hear from 2 of the organizations who were part of Innovation Cohort 1 and continued their projects in year 2, and in the final year, took their projects to other organizations for replication.
Honestly.
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 It's that easy to have honest conversations about love,
sex, and relationships
with the young people in your life.
At Honestly Youth Sexual Health, we are building a movement
to improve sexual health outcomes for youth.
Our movement is for everyone, because it will take all of us working together
to change the culture surrounding youth sexual health,
where every young person has the resources,
education, support,
and information to plan their futures and make informed decisions
about their health.
But why is this so important?
Oklahoma has the 4th highest teen birth rate in the nation.
And Oklahoma County has the highest number of teen birth rates in the state.
Our movement is growing larger and faster than ever before,
and we hope that you will join us. Lately, we've been focusing on innovation and caregivers, especially through our project, SPARK Innovation OKC. Our vision for this project is to create a culture where the norm is for caregivers to have open and honest conversations about sexual health with the youth in their lives. Honestly, and our project partners are developing innovative, equitable, and sustainable programs that support caregivers in having these life-changing conversations.
Our understanding of sexual health is always growing and changing, and we wanted to bring innovative new ideas to life within our community. We needed to create spaces to experiment, where we were willing to fail and pivot when things didn't work, and we have to allow the problems to be fully explored, while keeping the communities the projects aim to support at the center of our work through the entire process. We see the need for innovation because Oklahoma has been consistently in the top 5 for the teen birth rate, and we want to bring new ideas to the table to support youth and caregivers in our community.
We lead a huge collaborative effort with many of our partners supporting the community through direct service work in the schools, healthcare settings, and more. Their contribution to our movement is critical to the success we have been able to achieve. When creating SPARK Innovation OKC, we looked for gaps in services and resources in our community and eventually realized caregivers would be the perfect focus for this project. I know caregivers can mean a lot of different things, which is why we like it. Data shows caregivers increase the protective factors in young people's lives, but it also shows the caregivers often never receive sexual health education themselves. They don't know where to go to find support for having conversations about love, sex, and relationships with young people. This is where SPARK Innovation OKC comes in. Human-centered design is a unique approach to solving complex problems. With human-centered design, a challenge is identified, but instead of coming to the table with solutions, significant time and attention are given to understanding the end user, what the challenge looks like, and how it impacts them and their life. During human-centered design, we let the end user guide our process, give constant feedback, and shape every aspect of the end result. We brought in innovation coaches from the community to lead this process, challenge the status quo, and take our cohorts through a process that helped them lean into their communities authentically and see the caregivers as experts in their own lives.
During this process, we wanted to build a network. One way we accomplished this was through our network core, which consisted of amazing community organizations like Lilyfield, Sunbeam, OCCHD, and Variety Care. They gave their expertise to our projects from both the sexual health and the nonprofit lens, and served as a valuable resource and guide to our cohorts. The network core would provide feedback on projects, help review budgets and work plans, and be an overall resource to anyone involved in the project. This core group of partners helped strengthen our program network and furthered the breaking down of silos that can happen to organizations working in the same community.
Our Context Expert Advisory Committee is a group made of local caregivers who met monthly to ensure projects are culturally responsive, relevant to the community, and appropriate for caregivers. This committee serves a crucial role in helping select the organizations that are most appropriate and equipped to serve their communities. Helping those organizations to make changes to their projects makes them more relevant and effective for caregivers.
SPARK Innovation OKC spent 3 years working with 12 organizations split between 2 cohorts. In the first 2 years, our cohorts worked through the human-centered design process and participated in sexual health trainings before building out their projects. Those projects would then go through a process of being tested and refined, obtaining feedback and pivoting to better meet the needs of the caregivers they worked with. By the 3rd year of this project, we were doing additional testing and even launching replications of these projects by bringing in additional organizations as partners.
Through SPARK Innovation OKC, Honestly has been able to assist in the distribution of information, tools, and trainings to over 7,000 people in Oklahoma County. Throughout the SPARK Innovation Grant, Honestly provided more than 15 training opportunities to cohorts and community groups. Across 48 training implementations, SPARK Innovation OKC projects reached 4,406 community members, including 1,812 caregivers and 887 youth.
Honestly, Youth Sexual Health
envisions a community that embodies the idea that sex education is for everyone.
We know from our research and experts right here in our community
that conversations about sexual health should not be limited by age.
That means programs and systems designed to support youth, college students, and adults.
Adults need this education so they can pass down accurate
and affirming information to young people.
Not to mention, sexuality is something you can never fully learn.
Because information and resources needed change as we get older.
Rather than perpetuating fear and shame, we see a future where
honest information is the expectation.
If we start there, we can build spaces for discovery and innovation.
Awesome work. Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Damon Anthony William, and I'm a co-founder of the Modern Manhood Foundation. And we had the opportunity to replicate the Freedom City's innovation, which you're going to hear about next. So Freedom City strives to remove barriers and provide support for students and families in Oklahoma City to reach their potential through mentoring, tutoring, and other organizations and programs. So here's a short video highlighting their project.
Our organization is Freedom City, and our mission is to remove barriers and provide support for students and families in Oklahoma City to reach their potential. Our innovation is an 8-week Zoom presentation
specifically called Shift, Sexual Health Information for Caregivers of Teens.
We introduce a specific topic related to sexual health, whether it's about gender identity or about the internet and its influence on sexual health.
We've had so many emotions as a result of the program. Sometimes people start the program and they're actually upset because it's literally designed to change the mindset of our caregivers and help them to understand exactly what they need to be teaching their kids and how.
Some of the issues and challenges that our caregivers in our area were facing included STIs, so their teens and their tweens, maybe they had conversations about sexually transmitted infections. There were pregnancies that were happening, unintended pregnancies, and lots of conversations about consent and sex.
We have helped people with the gender talk. We do a lot of work around LGBTQA+. A lot of our caregivers are African Americans. And so the church has played a big role in what is okay for African Americans. And so a lot of times they come in and they're like, there's only boy and there's only girl. And we're helping to educate them on what exactly their child could be experiencing and how they can support them in that. I learned so much from the human-centered design process. We needed to actually talk to our caregivers. And so once we did that, we realized all they wanted was some curriculum. And that's what the human-centered design training did, was show us how to actually listen to our clients and create something based on what they want.
Our program is able to go worldwide, even though our focus here in OKC was on minority families. Majority families would also benefit from the information as well.
The emphasis on humanity is paramount above anything. You have to have identity in whatever you're doing, right? So to be a service to others, there has to be intention. There has to be purpose. What our job was to do, just talk to them and just make them understand that, hey, we're in this together. It doesn't have to be this mind-blowing opportunity where you have to feel like, oh no, I don't have enough tools, I don't have enough education or information, and knowing that everything that they need is within community, and we're going to help them.
So joining us now are Brittany Carter-Thomas and Dr. Angel Wilson from Freedom City, and our wonderful panelists, Dr. Tyler Burns, Data and Strategic Learning Specialist at Honestly, Brittany Keck, Training and Capacity Building Manager at Honestly, Susan Mooring, Investment Principal, Cortado Ventures, and Dr. Ronil Matthews, Director of Equity and Strategic Partnership at Honestly. So, Dr. Ronil, will you start us off this time?
So I saw on your video the innovation that you developed. How is it different than where you started when you first came into this project?
Oh my goodness, I'll let Dr. A speak on this too, but we have come full circle. For those of you guys who have been with us from the beginning, as some of our previous cohorts have stated, we started completely over when we heard from the caregivers. What we thought and what they wanted was 360 plus degrees different than what we actually decided to do. But I'll let Dr. A kind of share more about that now.
Y'all, it was so funny though. It just, I think all of the cohorts before us have given praise to this idea of, hey, we know what we're doing. We have the smarts, we have the grant, right? And then you go in and your caregivers are like, yeah, no, who brought you here? This is not what we want. So for us, it was really important that we just pivot. Everything about what we're doing, everything about, I know my own personal life is about pivoting. So we were very happy to just do that. Throw everything out the window, and instead of trying to follow everything to the letter and doing it how you think you're supposed to do, we had to just do it in our own way.
So what was one of your major pivots?
When we went online, yeah. So when we started, it was in the midst of COVID, and we call ourselves, oh, well, we're gonna do some in-person. And no, it did not work. So what we did, we kind of straddled at first and did in-person and online, and people would come. We'd have like maybe 2 or 3 people that would come in person, and then other people would be online, and we scrapped that and we went completely online. We did Zoom and we live recorded to social media. That's where we got them.
So I want to flash back even further. So before you applied for the first SPARK program, talk to us about the work that your organization was doing and why you decided to apply. What were the problems that you were seeing that you came in wanting to solve?
Yeah, so Freedom City is all about helping kids reach their potential. And so we do that through academics, exposure, and confidence. And so one of the things that we saw a lot of was that we wanted our kids to reach their potential, like I said, but they couldn't because they were getting pregnant at a young age. And so we were frustrated by that. We strive to overcome generational poverty. And so one of the biggest indicators of generational poverty in our communities is really that teen pregnancy. And so we wanted to actually do something about that. And so we decided to apply for this grant, and it's been history since then. Yeah.
All right, let's flash forward. You replicated this year. What was it like taking a project that you had spent so much time and effort building up and handing it off to other groups? Also, maybe who were the groups that you handed it to?
It was so challenging to hand it off. Y'all already know, because we would talk about it. It was so hard, y'all, to hand off all of this work that y'all are doing, right? And this idea of, well, it's gonna be a group, an organization, they're gonna just take it and run with it. And to not have your hands on it, it is like, I would say it's like having a child that you're just like, okay, I incubated you, go with this other person. And that's how it was, that's how it felt for us, I think. But what was so helpful was the 2 groups that we identified to replicate were Modern Manhood, as y'all already see how phenomenal they are. And then It's My Community Initiative. Both organizations are all about strengthening families and building community, whether it's primarily for fathers or whether it is the people in their lives that need to basically be a source of uplift. So the replication part, they did dynamically, right? But at the same time, it was difficult to let it go. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about some of the experience of watching them facilitate and
Watching them, like I said, it was amazing to take your idea, because our idea, we developed this curriculum and it's 8 weeks. We noticed that ours was the longest out of everybody's. Ours is the most hands-on because we are involved every step of the way. And they did phenomenally. They impressed us every step of the way. Their participants were engaged. They asked questions because, we would check up on from time to time. And just watching someone else or other communities, other participants, other audiences be able to absorb this information in a way that we would never know because our population was this or our audience was this. So to watch other people in their niche groups was amazing.
I want to ask a follow-on to that. I'm wondering how much of the curriculum and the program that you developed was really just sort of a program in a box that they were able to take and run with, or if you ran into, you guys developed this specifically for your population and now you have different population or different, target audience. Were there things that had to be adjusted? What was that process like?
Yes, so I can say within our replication for the groups, we primarily dealt with mothers. So mothers, godmothers, grandmothers, aunties, or aunts, some people pronounce it. We say auntie. But it was just different, sisters. And so when Modern Manhood took it, we definitely had internal conversations about, oh my goodness, what is it gonna look like for fathers and uncles and brothers? And again, they did so well. They made a way to kind of master the material in a way that was presentable for their audience, but also tweaked to be audience appropriate. So I think it went really well. Yes, there were questions, but overall it seemed to go really well.
Okay, tell us about your plans to continue the growth of your program beyond this grant. Where is it going? What are you going to do?
Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the things that this grant has really helped us uncover is what do we want the future of our organization to look like? So one thing that we're doing, we're going to replicate this program, obviously, over and over. That's our goal. But our goal actually as an organization is to replicate our other programs as well, because we've recognized the importance of human-centered design and making sure that we are getting the voices, hearing the voices of our kids and our teens and even our caregivers as well, but then making sure that we are replicating everything. So we're not putting ourselves in a box where we're only able to serve 1,000 kids. No, we want to replicate with other like-minded organizations so we can serve 35,000, 40,000, whatever it may be, so we can really spread the word.
So for those who want to get in contact with you or maybe interested in being one of those replication organizations, how do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is freedomcityokc.com. We have a contact us link on our page. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Freedom City OKC.
Thank you, Brittany and Dr. Wilson with Freedom City. We appreciate you updating us on this project again this year. Hello, I'm Jared Williams. I am with the YWCA. We replicated Braving the Talk that was created in year 1 by Sisu and Dr. Wright and is being continued by Honestly. Our next innovator is One. The mission of One, or Our Neighborhood Empowered, is to positively impact Northwest Oklahoma City with a holistic approach to child and adolescent development, adult enrichment, and neighborhood empowerment. Here's a short video highlighting their project.
Here at One, our innovation through Wonderfully Made has been to talk to the community, talk to the caregivers about what do they want their kids to hear? What do they wish that they learned?
Our mission and purpose here at Wonderfully Made is to connect our caretakers with information and knowledge that they can use when they are reaching their children. Our program is unique because we are centered in a church, and a lot of times churches don't have those conversations when it comes to gender identity, sexual health. We do talk about abstinence and how that prevents, most of unwanted pregnancies and sexually transmitted infections. We also try to understand and respect others and their bodies and what does consent look like? Why do we have different pronouns? We try to explain those things so that we can go out in our community and relate and connect.
We expected to go in and be teaching the caregivers how to talk to their children about these topics, but a lot of the time we were teaching the caregivers about themselves, about things that they needed to learn about how to have healthy relationships, how to have boundaries, ways that they can discuss this with their families.
I feel like the caretakers are receptive. Some of them are a little uncomfortable with it, but as we meet each week, they get more and more comfortable.
Not only did they not know how to talk to their students about some of these topics, but there's so much information that's changing. So they didn't know where to go to get accurate information.
The sex talk keeps changing. Our kids are being exposed with social media younger and younger, and so we're finding out that they actually know more from their friends rather than from the adults and people that have experience.
So often we find information on our phone and we are just content there, but we forget the impact and the value that you have when you are learning in a group, learning from your peers, learning from people who've gone through this before, have a different experience. Wonderfully Made is a program that we will continue to do. Each year, each semester, we'll just continue to have these conversations with caregivers who have gone through the program and new caregivers who still want to, because these topics are important, and even though our world is changing, we need to be right there with it, providing support for those who need it most.
Joining us now is John Macy Serenga and Andrew Hedges with One. Brittany, please start us off this time.
Hi. So tell us about where you are now with the project, how's it going, and what needs you were originally working to fill with your project.
Right now, we are just sharing our project, basically getting new people to join on board with us, and it's going really well. I mean, we found 2 different organizations that are now taking the lead and doing their first classes, and seeing that the outreach just grow to different communities, but going really well. I mean, we have gotten a lot more feedback this time around, and I'm not really sure why, but near the end of our second course, we had double the amount of people show up for the last session. I don't know if it's just they liked the topic and that was what they wanted to hear about, but we're just seeing a lot more interest in that.
You're gaining momentum. You're gaining momentum yes. in the community and a lot more interest. So it takes time. It takes time to build these projects and really get it out there. Awesome.
Well, tell us a little bit more about One and the work that you do in the community, and how do you see this innovation fitting into the work that you currently do?
So with Our Neighborhood Empowered, we do after school care for elementary age kids, so K through 5. And we work on the Northwest side, basically with Putnam City Schools, but we bring those kids in and we do literacy tutoring and any kind of homework and needs that they have. One of the things that Kaylee Vaughn, who teaches a lot of our program, saw was that we don't have the connection necessarily with the parents as much as we do with the kids. So we pick the kids up from school, we drop them off, but sometimes we're missing that parent interaction. So when she heard about this grant a couple of years ago, she was like, this is great because now we can win over the caretakers as well as our kids. So we have 2 basically separate things going on in the same building.
So I have a follow-up question. A lot of our other organizations are working with caregivers of teens. How do you think that your program has been different working with elementary age kids?
We are finding that elementary age kids know a lot because they have teenage siblings. So it was actually surprising when we were telling the parents, I think, to have homework the first time and ask their kids, like, what do you know about sex? They all came back and were like mortified. Like, they're like, they told us all of these things. Like, they're third grade. How did they hear this? Where is this coming from? And so it registered with them and with me because I have a high schooler and also elementary age kids. And so I'm like, they know more than I thought they knew. And so we should have been having this conversation sooner. Like, I'm just talking to my freshman about it. And he's like, I've been knowing about all this kind of stuff, you know? So it really hasn't changed it much because they know now you're exposed so much younger.
Awesome. So you guys have done how many classes internally? 3?
Oh, goodness. Now, let's see. This semester we've done.
Oh, I didn't realize this was going to be a tough question.
4. I'm like,
a lot. Yeah.
Yes, because we just keep doing it. We do 4-week sessions, and then sometimes, like, we're going to do another one starting next week. So
So you've had many internal iterations of the program, but you guys are in the first cohort of SPARK, and so with this version of it, you had to replicate it with other organizations. So talk to us about that process. How did you find the organizations? How did that go? How replicable was it? What things had to change? Things like that.
So we have been working with Hope for Generations and Jade and Oliver Basketball. Both of those organizations are on our side of town, but reaching different groups of people. So we have always been trying to find a way to partner. Like Jade and Oliver Basketball uses the Cole Community Center's gym and runs her nonprofit out of there, doing basketball clinics with children of all ages and races, but she is Native American and focuses on the Native American community, which is not a community that I have necessarily been able to reach or been in contact with much. And then Hope for Generation does more mentoring, and it's for like 5th through 9th grade. So he's working with kind of the end of elementary to the beginning of high school. So still different groups, but around the same area. So we just reached out to them and kind of told them what we were doing. And again, since they're kid focused, they wanted the opportunity to focus on the parents or offer them some kind of information or a course. So we kind of just were able to connect through those, our paths overlapping and crossing.
And how much of the program, if any, had to change or be adjusted for these new groups with different target audiences?
From kind of what we noticed was not really a lot, just because of like each community, I mean, has a different level of understanding, kind of like what others have talked, like other groups have been talking about, of like different communities have different expectations internally. And so, but we're all still finding a need for talking about sexual health, sexual education, talking about the uncomfortable conversations right now of like talking to your kid about gender, talking to them about sexuality. And I mean, sex is still a very uncomfortable conversation for people. So being able to facilitate that, and I actually get to teach one of the courses where I talk to the parents about talking to your kid about sexuality and gender identity, and how completely uncomfortable that level of area is now, and being able to help facilitate how do they have those conversations, and also how do they learn about their own personal biases and understandings. So
awesome, thank you.
So now that you've had some time, you've got a lot of iterations of Wonderfully Made under your belt. Where do you see the project going?
I think our hope is that we will continue to at least offer it twice a year. And then we're hoping that just with the other iterations that we've been doing, that they will just continue to reach out and find new groups and just let it spread and having this conversation in our communities. I think people are ready to talk about it. It's interesting how many of the parents were like, I just didn't know where to start. And so having this group, I guess you can say, where we're all on the same page and we're all like, we didn't know either. We don't know how to do this, and having homework assignments and practicing and coming back, we've just started leaning on each other, and we're starting to, say the same things, and our kids are going to the same high schools and middle schools. And so I'm hoping that they'll just continue to invite more people, and we can just like branch out. There's so many other nonprofits around our areas that we're hoping we can reach just by continuing to offer these.
It's really exciting to hear where you are, because I remember, and I think a lot of our cohorts have shared the same struggle about recruitment and getting people to come to these new ways of talking about sex, come to our group, and a lot of people don't like to come. And you have really, just hearing you talk, the growth that you've experienced with your program, and now it sounds like you're just rolling into a next one, and let's do a next one because you have so much interest. I think it just speaks a lot to the work that you're doing through the grant, and we're really excited to see that. So how do people connect with you, and how do people learn more about your project and come? How do you recruit more? Where are you going?
You can always email us at info@OKC or at oneokc.org. Sorry, I wanted to give my personal one. And there's information on our website, social media, and we share that throughout. So send us an email.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Jamise. We love hearing how your project has grown and impacted your community. Now it's time for our third giveaway. Congratulations to our winner, Clayton Bell. Stick around, we still have one more giveaway before the end of Spark Tank, but now we are going to move into taking another quick break before we hear from our amazing keynote. Again, I encourage you to walk away from your screen, get up and move a little bit, and we will see you back here at 1:20. Thank you. All right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your final break of the day. Before we hear from our keynote, I want to give a huge thank you to our incredible panel of sexual health and human-centered design experts for asking engaging and thoughtful questions of our innovation organizations today. So thank you to Dr. Tyler Burns, Brittany Keck, Susan Mooring, and Dr. Ronell Matthews. I'd also like to thank our replication organizations for helping MC. These people and organizations are Rachel Eskridge and Jared Williams from the YWCA, Dr. Donnell Cole and Dr. Damon, co-founders of Modern Manhood. So thank you all again so much for helping. All right, we are excited to now introduce you to our amazing keynote speaker. Dr. Tanya Bass, she, her, hers, is an award-winning sexuality educator and advocate for mental health and health equity. She is the foundress of the North Carolina Sexual Health Conference, NC SexCon, and has been making waves in the field for years. Her warm and welcoming approach has earned her many accolades, including awards for her outstanding contributions to the field of sexual and reproductive health. Tanya is an alumna of North Carolina Central University's Department of Public Health Education, where she currently serves as the lead instructor for human sexuality. Her commitment to educating the next generation of sexuality educators is evident in her work as an adjunct instructor for several years. She completed her PhD in education at Widener University and the Center for Human Sexuality Studies. Tanya is a member of several professional organizations, including the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, or ASECT, the North Carolina Society for Public Health Educators, the Women of Color Sexual Health Network, and the Association of Black Sexologists and Clinicians. Her dedication to her profession is clear in her roles as Vice President of Membership of ASECT and a member of the editorial board for the American Journal of Sexuality Education. She is committed to serving her community and educating about sexuality across the lifespan. Her warm and friendly approach to her work makes her a sought-after speaker, an educator, and for those of you who were not here, also an amazing singer. Led us through a beautiful choir earlier. So without further ado, Dr. Tanya Bass.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be back before you and getting started. I just have to say a couple of things before I dive into the presentation. And first and foremost, because I'm not sure if we said it today, but happy Pride. I'm so honored to spend the first day of Pride Month with you all. It's like the best way to kick it off. And I don't know, I feel inclined to ask you to stand to your feet if you are able. Could you stand to your feet? And whether you presented, whether you have supported these organizations, whether you've been out in the community, I'm emotional. I've never, and I'm just saying never, felt so on fire about the work in sexuality education as I do here in Oklahoma. So give yourselves a round of applause because this is fire. Ooh. Thank you so very much. You all may be seated. I mean, it is amazing. I was like, why am I here? I'm glad to be here, but you are doing all the things that we want people to do. And it's so awesome to see it, to even feel it when I hear people answering questions, when I'm watching the videos. So that's just been amazing to experience while I've been here with you, and I feel honored to have done so. So I'm gonna jump in. I just wanna make sure I stay with the slides. God, I was trying not to keep this in my hand, but I will. So I come to you, you heard my introduction, but one of the things I wanted to share with you is kind of my personal story, and it speaks to caregiving and understanding what that means to young people, and even as we go throughout the lifespan, what it means to be a caregiver even in our older years, our more mature times. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and at around age 10, so let me just put some context to that. Born and raised, had a wonderful experience. My brother and sister are 10 years older than me. And so during the time when they transitioned, both went into the military, I was home alone for the majority of the time without my siblings. And it was just me and my mom. And she worked a shift where sometimes I would have to stay at neighbors or other caregivers would provide for me while she worked her late night shifts. Now, never did my mother not take care of me, and she was a wonderful mother. But I used to go down south. And y'all know I'm from North Carolina. I didn't know my family was from North Carolina. I just knew it was down south. And I love being down south, running in the grass. You can't get this kind of stuff in New York. And so my grandmother was like, well, I'm gonna move when I retire, and I'm moving down south. She still never said North Carolina. And I was like, well, I'm moving with you. And she was like, yeah, I've raised my kids. I am not taking anybody else's with me. And my mom was like, well, I don't think you're gonna like it, but if you want to. And so I share that to also impose a narrative that I had the autonomy. My mother let me make a decision to move with my grandmother. Now, granted, she probably didn't think I wanted to stay, but she let me pack a suitcase and go with my grandmother. And ideally, I love being in North Carolina. Now, once I get into my puberty years, we'll talk about it a little bit later. I did try to move back to New York, but I wanted to offer up that my mom, as a caregiver, allowed me the autonomy to make a very big decision for myself, and that my grandmother honored that, and we had enough of a relationship that she allowed me to live with her in North Carolina. And both of these women in my life have been phenomenal caregivers. Now, as Ronell was going through the timeline about sexual health, and y'all can laugh if you want, but I know I was kind of cute. I felt like as I'm looking at this timeline that my life actually was flashing before me, because I'm looking at this timeline and I'm living it in some of the years, especially in the 70s and 80s, and I'm like, okay, I remember some things, and then into the 90s, and then I remember being a professional in the work, and like all these floods of emotions and memories came back to me, and I'm hoping that some of you had some of that. So these moments were flashing back, but I think that I am uniquely qualified to speak to sexuality and caregiving because of my personal connection and my transition from North Carolina, from New York to North Carolina. So if you look at the first image, that was me in my younger years. I actually was graduating from preschool. I didn't go to kindergarten. I was kind of smart, but the daycare center that I went to actually equipped folks that we actually went from that center into first grade. And so that was my graduation. I unfortunately lost 2 front teeth, and I remember that day not feeling as cute as I thought I was at that little young age. And my mom did my hair, and she was like, no, you are beautiful. Your pictures are gonna be great, and make sure you smile for the camera, because usually when you use your front teeth, you don't really want to smile. And I just remember her instilling me the basics around my sexuality of what it means to feel beautiful, to be beautiful, and accept your body as it is, even if it seems imperfect in so many different ways to other people. So then I moved to the second picture. Now I like hip hop, and this was my MC Light phase. As a matter of fact, my hair wasn't that long because I had just cut it into an asymmetrical, so you can't really see. This side was way longer, but it was like behind me, and this side was like super short. And also you can't see, but you might be able to tell that I had on like a lot of gold rings. And I wore my cousin's 2-finger ring because later this night, this is at our high school, we were gonna have a, what do you call it, a show. I forget, a talent show. And during the talent show, some of the students were gonna get together and do self-destruction. If you haven't heard that song, it's a hip hop song. And of course, I was gonna spit the MC Light verse. So I had to have my gold chains outside of my shirt and my 2-finger ring that I borrowed from my cousin. But this was the time that I'm transitioning. I went through the transition of puberty. I went through the transition, like when I moved with my grandmother, I literally lived in walking distance of our church. And my grandmother became the secretary of the church. And my uncle was in charge of the ushers. And my other uncle was a trustee. So therefore, I spent a lot of time around adults and a lot of time in the church. And as I think about that and I think about sexuality, I remember sitting there thinking about the ways what I heard sometimes in the church, even at a young age, it sticks out for me, didn't feel good in my body sometimes and didn't match what might have been the conversations at home or with people in my family. So all of this was happening, the church culture, the transition, the whole thing around hip hop and what that meant around sexuality, especially for Black females. And then as I'm thinking about this timeline, if you will, these circles, was the implications of HIV. So I graduated high school in 1990, but prior to that, we had family members who had moved back to North Carolina. That's kind of a trend, New York to North Carolina with my family. And I remember C. Edward Coop, if y'all remember who that is, had sent out a mailer about what people need to know about HIV, something similar to that. And I remember getting that mailer. I don't recall having a conversation with my grandmother specifically about it, but I know that she just gave me, like, she gave it to me to also read. And I just learned a lot about HIV, but realized later, years later, so I'm inserting some of the future, that I had some cousins who moved, lost their mother to complications of HIV. But the stigma around that, no one mentioned that. And it was actually 3 siblings who died from complications of HIV, but we were told like it was cirrhosis or cancer, things of that nature. Never said that. And then one of these cousins, my younger cousins, a child of one of the ones who passed away, just stopped seeing them. She was never playing with us. She always sat down. She would go to Durham, to the hospital sometimes. And at that young age, I didn't know what that was. But fast forward, I realized she was actually going to the Duke Infectious Clinic. And she was very sick. She was one of 3 triplets. And out of the triplets, she was the one who was actually born infected with HIV. And no one ever talked about that. And in her passing, no one ever talked about that. Like her immediate family knew. But one time I just went home and I was like, hey, how are the triplets? And it was kind of like, hey, well, so and such is fine, such and such is fine, and such passed away a few years ago. I'm like, a few years ago, no one ever said anything. So even in my family, where we had some conversations about sex and sexuality, we still didn't have the conversations needed around sex and sexuality. And I don't have a picture of my grandmother up here, and that's my bad. She'll probably like be really mad about right now, but her name is Mary Kennedy, so I'm gonna honor her with that. She passed away in 2018, but now the caregiving situation has also changed because that's my mama right there, who is 80 years old. She spent 61 years in her apartment where I grew up and where I moved from when I came to North Carolina. And April 3rd, she moved to North Carolina 8 miles away from me. Y'all can, yeah. If she's watching this, I love you, Mommy. But also, the conversations that we've had throughout my career, throughout my life, have been phenomenal. At the first summer that I came back home to New York, I write about this in my colleague's book. Brittany Brodus Smith has a book, I think it's Dear Mama, and she talks about the stories that people have about their moms and sexuality. And you know, some people aren't moms, some people are mothers, and some people are parents, and some people are birthers, and that's fine. Everybody has their place. But I shared in that story a poem called My Mother Wear Noxzema, and then I did another one this summer where I had experienced somewhat of a trauma. I don't want to like discount trauma, but one of my older cousins, but you know we're all cousins, was sleeping under the bed and would try to actually touch some of us younger children. And as much fun as I had playing and being back in New York, and this happened in New Jersey, this one weekend I was like, yeah, I'm not going because I'm not trying to fight to get in the middle. None of my cousins are talking about it. I don't know if it's happening to me, but guess what? I'm smart enough to know I'm not going back. And my mom was peeling potatoes, and she was like, why didn't you go back? And I was like, oh, I just didn't want to. And she was like, well, you know, you can tell me anything. I was like, yeah, but I don't want you to go to jail. I don't want you to get mad. And she was like, why would I go to jail? And I told her what was happening. And so again, my mother stepped up as a caregiver to protect me. Now, how awesome was it that I had the relationship with my mother to even confide and trust and tell her what exactly was going on, and that she was attuned to me as her child to even continue to persist and ask these questions. And I know I didn't offer you all a trigger warning or anything like that. That's my story. I feel like it's, I was fortunate in many ways to not have experienced childhood sexual abuse, but if I had gone back, I never know what would have happened. But I wanted to share that as an idea around my personal connection with sex and sexuality, and having amazing caregivers in my presence. So that's just the way I'm gonna set the stage. And now my mom is 80, she'll be 81 in July, and the conversations we have now are about like lubricant and sex toys a little bit. Maybe not for her, because I don't wanna put her business out there, but her friends and her little friends, like she used to call my friends little friends. Now her and her little friends are having conversations about it, and it's just been interesting. And right before she moved, I had visited her, and one of her neighbors was like, you got anything for me? And I was just like, no, not today, but I did give her a rose, if y'all know what that is. And so she was happy about that. So this gives you a little bit of the context on who I am and why I'm standing before you. And as I think about it, I hope your personal history aligned with it. And I wanted to frame my talk and time with you around a model that I appreciate, I embrace, I try to teach from it, and I actually in some ways try to live from it. So sometimes I can't stop thinking about it when things happen, especially when around pleasure and things that bring me joy. I always say, ooh, circles of sexuality. So how many of you are familiar or heard of the circles of sexuality? All right, we got a couple of hands. Awesome. And as I was sitting here listening to you all, I was like, you know what? That circle, this circle. Y'all are doing it. So whether you've heard of it or not, I'm going to introduce it to you, but know that most of your work is centered around these circles. Now, what you don't see on these circles, and this is just a depiction, if you really want to visualize it, and it's hard to do that on a slide to make it look clean, and one day I'll figure out how, just imagine that these circles all overlap. So it's not like they just stand alone over here, over here, over here. They're kind of like overlapping. What do you call those Venn diagrams? They kind of touch each other. The other aspect that this is the model as it is, but what you can include in this model as like smaller circles or maybe even larger circles are values, culture, technology, history, racism as a history, our beliefs and the way that we are socialized as individuals. Now, you see all 5 of them. Hopefully you can see that text. And so we have sensuality, intimacy, sexual identity, sexualization, reproductive health, and behavior. Y'all with me on those 5? So I got some questions so you can be engaged. Now, the first question is, which one, when you think about your own sexual experience, are you most likely to recall? So would it be, raise your hand, like we're gonna do like the Kiki thing, but raise your hand if it's sensuality. Raise your hand if it's intimacy, all right? What about sexual identity? Sexualization, and maybe reproductive health and behavior. Now, erase that question. Now the question is, which one are you most likely to teach about in the work that you do? Is it sensuality? Hands. Is it intimacy? Hands. Somebody's like, oh, me. Is it sexual identity? Hands. Is it sexualization? And maybe is it reproductive health and behavior? Like, I feel like everybody should do this. And I put them in this order. They're no particular order as we talk about them. Oh, and let me pause and give honor and recognition. So the Circles of Sexuality is a model that was popularized by Dr. Dennis Daly. And unfortunately, Dr. Daly actually passed away this January. And I had the pleasure of meeting him at an ASEC conference and take his one of his workshops. Like, y'all, he's a lecturer's lecturer. Because I was just like, woo, we're not going to take a break. We're not going to do any activities. And I think that's why I enjoy doing activities around the circles, because he was like, let's lecture, let's go. But what I appreciated about his lecture and the discussion is that we kind of had some push-pull going on in that room. Like Dr. Daly would say, well, this thing, and I'll get to that a little bit, is, related to sensuality. And I'd be like, well, I probably was annoying. Well, couldn't it also be intimacy? He was like, yeah, it could. But then he would go back to like, it's absolutely in sensuality, not like in a disagreeing way, but it's kind of like we all are going to look at these circles and think about them in different ways. The more I sit with them, the more I talk with them, I can see more of that overlap or where something could be moved from one circle to another. So here are the circles. Now I want to offer this. Which circle, now I know I haven't defined them, so this is just your knee-jerk reactions here with this raising of a hand. Which circle do you think, as caregivers or working with caregivers, being a caregiver, that you probably get the most misinformation from? So let's go sensuality. All right. What about intimacy? What about sexual identity? Okay. And what about sexualization? And then reproductive health and behavior. So I'm seeing some people like, you know what, 1, 2, 3, five across the boards, right? So that is absolutely true. So now I want to take some time to kind of go through the circles. The first circle is sensuality. Now I'm going to tell y'all, this is my favorite circle. I put these circles in the order of which I think we don't talk a lot about, we don't teach a lot about, and we ourselves as adults sitting in this space haven't received the most information about and probably could learn a little bit more. So with sensuality is just thinking about who we are as sensual beings. Now the first thing that comes up should be your 5 what? Your 5 senses. Now anybody in here like some good old tasting food? Listen, anybody in here like to feel something smooth on their body and soft? Or maybe you like stuff rough on your body and scratchy, right? So sensuality is understanding our sexuality as it relates to our 5 senses, how we feel about our bodies and how we feel about the bodies of other people. One of the things I tell young folks sometimes is like, you can find something attractive but not want to be intimate or in relationship with that person. You can find something attractive, but it doesn't mean your identity has changed. You get to determine who you are in these spaces. So just on my ride today, so I had an Uber ride here, and things smell different to different people. I think my driver thought that his car smelled good. I did not like the fragrance coming out of that car. So when I walked in, I was kind of nervous to like embrace and talk to people because all I could smell in my nostrils was this smell. And I was like, dang, the one time I didn't wear a mask, and then I felt like it was gonna be in my clothes. So while they were up here practicing, I know they were like, what is she doing? But I had to take out my lotion. Like I carry lotion and body spray. Today I didn't have the body spray. And I was like, I'm gonna put it on my hands. I need to get in my nostrils. And I rubbed it on my clothes and I put it on the nape of my neck. Cause I was just like, whew. I can't take that. And so I'm thinking about the senses. It didn't bring me pleasure at all. And when the lotion that I use and the smells that I have, that's my pleasure center. So we need to, as caregivers, think about the ways our senses impact our sexuality. So if someone says something like they want to hold their special blanket, right? Let them hold that special blanket. It may be bringing them a sense of calmness, a sense of pleasure. Y'all remember, I think it was Linus. Is Linus the one from the Peanuts? Always had a little dirty blanket. But listen, for some reason, that was a comfort to Linus. I imagine that that blanket was soft. I imagine that it had a certain scent or smell to it that Linus really embraced. Also today, I was really hungry. I forgot that I was an hour, my brain is an hour ahead of y'all. And so at 11 o'clock, my stomach started growling. And I was like, well, when are we gonna eat? And so when I got the salad, I was telling, I forgot who was sitting beside me, but I was like, this salad is filling me in my warm places because I like all the things that are on this salad. And so even thinking about that with individuals. And then finally, I had, when I think about like, what we see as caregivers, we have to understand what people are seeing and how they emulate and embrace some of the things that we actually embrace. One of my colleagues said that she was just looking through her daughter's little purse. They had gone to see The Little Mermaid, and she said, well, let me see what's in your purse. And her daughter was like, no, it's mine. And she was like, well, no, I need to see what's in it. And she was like, no, I have everything I need. And so when the daughter stepped away, of course, she looked in the purse. She had her mom's favorite lipstick. But I'm pretty sure that she thought she was pretty and thought the color was pretty also. So it was something pleasurable about that lipstick. So as caregivers, we can consider what things we are withholding and what things we are providing as it relates to sexuality. Y'all still with me? All right, so let's get to intimacy. Now, some of y'all raised your hand about this. So this is kind of the ability that we can express closeness with one another. And what I love, Dr. Daly, when he was lecturing, said that you are extremely confident even being with yourself. And that is a challenge for a lot of people. And it's not loving yourself, because I'm not gonna practice that here. It's being with yourself and being able to enjoy the time with yourself and not need someone else to be connected to. This is a space that is often neglected, and as caregivers, we have to embrace the understanding of connection around vulnerability, around disclosure and trust, and how there's an ebb and flow, and sometimes the trust gets broken, right? Voluntarily or involuntarily. Anybody familiar with Catfish, the show? Do you ever wonder, like, now how in the world did you get catfished? But as human beings, we have a desire to connect with others, whether they're standing right here. The intimacy circle is really about presence. So it doesn't mean that you're physically present with me, but I feel connected and we're present online or through a chat or whatever. Yesterday, I'm not gonna say any names just in case they watch this too, but one of my Gemini friends, no offense, was having an exchange with one of her partners around like she had just spent the day doing education, and her friend was like, hey, I just really want to talk to you, just give me 5 minutes. And they were texting back and forth, and he was just kind of like, well, if you're doing all this texting, why can't you talk? And she was just like, I don't feel like it. But in her world, it was kind of like, I don't have the energy to talk, but I'm trying to connect with you. I'm giving you what I got, right? But he was also saying it's not really enough, but I'm gonna take what I can get. So intimacy is that ebb and flow of like meeting the needs of other people and having your needs met as well. Y'all rocking with me on intimacy? So as caregivers, we know that this is an important circle, and working with caregivers, we can reinforce the importance of this circle. Now, this is when I started getting like, okay, these are the things we started talking about. I started taking notes as y'all were presenting, so I might not have caught everybody's everything, but these are some of the things that stood out for me. So sexual identity, of course, is who we are as sexual beings, the boxes that people put us in, the boxes that we don't fit in, and then also the ability to just not have boxes, right? So our gender roles, our gender expectations, our gender expression, our orientation, who we're attracted to, how we identify, all of that is in this circle. Even our sense of maleness and femaleness, or not that, right? Like being gender non-binary, transgender, gender non-conforming, all of that. And our politics in many of these places in the US and even internationally has afforded us the opportunity to explore and affirm people in their identities as they come to know themselves. So having discussions with caregivers, I think it was Catch the Spark, BNC, mentioned that they have these discussions with caregivers, and who best to affirm young people in particular. Now, this is something that can happen through the course of the lifespan, but just thinking about, I think it was Liberate Freedom, Oklahoma offered, there's so many things that we have to unlearn. And that's that socialization, right? So all of us were brought up a certain way to think certain things. And as we continue to grow and get older and have our own lived experiences, we're kind of like, ooh, that's gross, or that's not right, or I don't believe that anymore. So that's the unlearning. As we experience other people, as we get new information, socialization and having these conversations with caregivers is critical for the unlearning, for the healing, the implied and also upheld social power that's based on our identities is dangerous. Again, you see this in the politics, but this is a space in this circle to have conversations about who we are and affirm that. Is that fair? All right, and I'm gonna move on to the next circle. So the next circle I feel like we talk a lot about is sexualization. And usually sexualization is one of the bad rap circles because it's kind of like this is where abuse, incest, coercion, the lack of consent lives. But it also could be positive, right? It could be flirting as long as it's consensual and not turning into harassment. Sometimes it's using your power over somebody else, not in a harmful way. Because if I go to the grocery store and I'm short a dime, I don't really care who's at the counter. I'm like, oh, I don't have a dime. I know what I'm playing up against in this power situation. If it's someone I consider a homegirl or whoever, I'm gonna play on whatever power dynamic I can because I am short a dime and I need whatever I'm purchasing. And so that's some ways that we can use our power. And then sitting here listening to, I think it was boundaries to basics or boundary and the basics, it was clear that caregivers needed to be aware around sexual assault and sexual abuse. And this is what lies in sexualization in this circle, but it's also hearing from Atlas as sexual beings who engage with youth who may have autism, or really any youth, we have to think about the social sexual cues. So some of my, two of my nephews are actually living with intellectual and developmental disabilities as well as some physical disability. But when we're talking to them, we also try to encourage them to like pick up cues if somebody's flirting with them or if they're trying to flirt with someone else. And when these issues might become harassment, like when might you need to stop a behavior, whether it's you or someone else, and the power dynamics that come into play with sexualization. So this is a circle that is very important as caregivers. Now I'm going to move to the next circle, which is reproductive health and behavior. Now this is where I feel like we get all the information, but not all the information about the information. So while we focus here most of the time, we're looking at teen pregnancy prevention, we're looking at STIs, we don't really talk about all the things. So if we're talking about anatomy, how many of you talk about the clitoris to any any individual or group you're talking with? Some people don't. It's important to talk about that. How many of you talk about the frenulum and the sensitivity of the glands? Some people don't, and like I'm seeing only 3 hands out of maybe 30. And so what we know is that we have to have conversations about reproductive health and behavior if we're talking about anatomy, but we also need to talk about the identities as it relates to if it's a trans identity, a gender nonconforming identity. We don't really tap into pleasure as much when we're talking about reproductive health and behavior, and we don't consider poverty. How does poverty play a part in pleasure? This has so many things that could impact the function of our bodies as well as our behavior. I just was talking to my colleague and she was telling me as she's raising her daughter, one of the biggest things that she's concerned about is how she's going to handle menstruation sometimes when she's not at a place where she can afford items or menstruation products. And so what is she going to do? How is she going to have this conversation with her child? So we have to consider the social determinants of health. We have to consider culture and that socialization that I talked about that we don't always unlearn, and we need to start unlearning. So I gave you the background of the circles. I just want to tell you that you can use the circles and you're already doing it, like I said earlier. But maybe when you're thinking about it, how does these circles make your programming a little bit better? It's as you're helping caregivers, you're equipping them through using this framework so that they can use it to equip young people or anybody that they're providing care for. It's like a win-win situation. If you talk about return on investment, you start learning about the circles. You pass that on, they'll pass that on, and at some point, hopefully, we'll have a generation of folks who understand more and more about sexuality. I think we talked about it changing and evolving and growing across the lifespan, but you gotta kind of learn the stuff to know that it's expanded so you can keep up with the times. And so I'm gonna leave you with these few things around why the circles are an appropriate model for working with caregivers. So when you use it, you can connect with this model yourself, like I just said, and you could connect as a caregiver or someone working with caregivers. The circles cover, and I think we heard earlier, what does it mean to get comprehensive sex education? The circles cover essential aspects of sexuality. And I feel like although this isn't the only model, this is a fairly comprehensive model around sexual beingness that can allow you to dive deeper in some conversations. The next one is being age appropriate. So ensuring that we know our conversations can't be one size all. It has to be in some ways individualized and tailored to the groups in which we are trying to teach. So we get to tailor them to the place that folks understand. And we need to make sure that our information that we're providing, whether it's directly to caregivers or the folks who are being cared for, that information is relevant, that it is accurate, and that it is suitable for their understanding, and that you can have practical examples. Like normally when I'm teaching the circles of sexuality, I'll ask folks like, here, how many of y'all know, I think, what's my favorite one that I use? 3 Little Pigs. 3 Little Pigs, which circle do you think it relates to? Do you think it relates to any of the circles? Does anybody know 3 Little Pigs? And normally you play it on what? If you really play it, you use what? Somebody's what? Say it. The toes, right? Now first, consent. Can I touch your toes? I'm gonna let you do 3 Little Pigs. And what's the last thing? What's the last piggy? What does the last piggy say? Isn't that fun? Say it together. What does the piggy say? All the way home. That's fun, that's pleasure. So you can use these circles at any age range. It doesn't mean like you gotta sit down and say, well, this is your clitoris, right? Although that wouldn't be a bad idea, but also you can think about like, how do you experience pleasure and how that can show up from any age range and it be age appropriate to talk about pleasure. All right, y'all will laugh about that later. All right, so then open communication. This is most critical, and I think the cool part is that we understand that a lot of these circles and the reasons why using it for caregivers is important because they overlap in the model. Trust is paramount as it relates to open communication. It can either drive or block the work that you're doing in educating. And I think in advancing sexual health equity in particular, trust, we have to remember that trust is something that we earn, and it has the ability to increase our connection to have deeper conversations and meet the needs of the folks that we are actually serving. Now I'm coming up on the last few. So as caregivers, we also have the unique opportunity to begin conversations early and often, specifically about bodily autonomy, respect of bodies, our own bodies and others, as well as any type of consensual behavior. And it's critical that we have the conversations and give cues to action as it relates to equitable relationships. Now, a lot of us will say healthy relationships, and healthy is kind of like in context of the people who are in that relationship. But what we can foster is the idea around equitable relationships. What's working for you? Because listen, everybody, the internet went wild the other day when something was taken out of context, when Gabrielle Union said that her and Dwayne Wade had a 50-50 relationship. First of all, that's none of my business, but also if that works for them, that's fine. If that's how they see equity, that's how they see equity. So we have to think about that as well. And then lastly is our self-awareness. When I think about the circles, it really hit home around self-awareness and self-esteem when I was listening to Boundaries to Basics, mentioning that hygiene was one of the areas that you all said was very important as it related to the teens and the youth that you were working with. And just think about how much of an implication that has on self-awareness and self-esteem. So it's amazing as caregivers, we can actually impact and I think it's the growth or the positivity related to self-esteem for young people. So those are the reasons why I think you should embrace the circles as a framework, at least learn about it and see how you can increase some of the areas of content that you might be lacking on. Maybe you're doing more than one circle than another, but like try to build that up so you have that comprehensive approach. And so when I think about these circles and talking about healthy relationships, it's really about communication. Again, going back to consent. I read or I heard an Instagram post from Dr. Thema was saying anger versus despair. The circles can also allow you in relationships, like she talked about meeting a person with an attitude. Y'all ever met somebody with an attitude? And normally you're either gonna do one or two things. You can be like, ooh, she got an attitude. Or, he got an attitude, right? Like you're gonna either meet them or avoid them. And so what Dr. Thema was offering is that we have to learn to have empathy. And so with the circles, we can learn to talk about navigating relationships with empathy and with compassion, and realize even one of the points that she brought up is sometimes when people are depressed, instead of being sad, they tend to turn into anger, and their anger is a sign that they're in despair. And if we approach them with empathy and compassion, we can navigate those relationships, even if it's for a moment in time. So promoting healthy relationships is another aspect. All right, for real, this is my last circle tip. We talked about inclusive and diverse perspectives, and earlier we mentioned the importance of having inclusive and affirming sex ed conversations, not making assumptions. I forget who was up here was saying not making assumptions. And in the past, I recall folks using, even with kiddos, and see if you remember if this was you, like you go to someone's house, you're a child, you're young, and people say, hey, you got a girlfriend? Hey, you got a boyfriend? Right? Like maybe that's not even an interest. It doesn't really affirm. It kind of puts on, again, that socialization, those expectations that we have for young people. So that's the thing as caregivers and working with caregivers, we want to back away from. So I just want you to remember that every family is different. Every day is a new opportunity for you to do better, grow better. And I'm hoping that as cohorts, y'all aren't, or members of a cohort, that you aren't just here today, that you're connecting with one another throughout your time together, that as you continue this work, there's some things that I feel like, ooh, if they worked with them, that would be so bomb, right? So hopefully you're seeing what other people are doing and how your work can overlap. And like Oklahoma's gonna take over. Now, don't y'all try to come from North Carolina, but you're doing such amazing work, and I want to thank you for your time on today. And you can slide into my DMs. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Tanya Bass. And I just thank you for this opportunity and really appreciate all the great work that you're doing. I also want to encourage you either as a cohort, so here we go, table, honestly, that people need to go and present your work at some of these conferences, especially nationally at the National Sex Ed Conference. I'll plug my own conference. Y'all can come to the North Carolina Sexual Health Conference, to the Healthy Teen Network Conference. People need to know that you're doing this great work so that maybe they'll do something similar or learn from you in the work that they're doing. So thank you for your time on today.
Oh my goodness, y'all, that was so good. This has been such a wonderful event, and absolutely, Dr. Bass is right. We should be spreading the word. I recently went to Washington, D.C., and we were talking with a lot of different organizations about the work that we're doing. And they just went like, oh gosh, you're doing sexual health in Oklahoma? How? And I was like, well, a lot of ways, you all. And we have some really great sexual health education partners that are going to our schools, and we are doing a lot around sexual health education, equipping caregivers to have conversations with their youth, and you saw it all here today. And there's even more going on in our community, and so I think sometimes a lot of what people see in the news is not the great things that are happening in Oklahoma. But as Dr. Bass said several times, wow, look at Oklahoma and look at us. Look at all that you all are doing. Like, this is such incredible work. I'm fired up and I get to work with you all every day. And I hope you all are fired up leaving this conversation. I would challenge and encourage everybody who is in the live audience and who's watching on the live stream, thank you for tuning in, to just kind of take a moment of reflection on all that you've heard about today. Where do you see your own sexual health story in some of the organizations and some of the stories that have been shared here today? And then thinking about what's your next step after you leave here? Was there a piece of information, an organization you want to get connected with, a caregiver you think should be connected with an organization, or a youth in your own life that you want to talk to about sexual health and relationships and intimacy and all of the great things that we've heard here today? So just take a second, think on what are you going to do when you leave? All right, I hope you figured it out. If you do and you are fired up about your next action, please slide into our DMs as well. I would love to hear how this event has inspired you and what you're going to walk away with and do today. So it's time for our final giveaway. Congratulations to our final winner, Maria Mancebo. And yes. And congrats to all of our winners. You will receive your shirt and card deck in the mail in the next couple of days. Again, I hope that you all are as inspired as we all are after hearing from our network organizations and the projects they have created to support caregivers in our community, and those incredible and impactful words from Dr. Ronell Matthews about the history and where we started with sexual health, and Dr. Tanya Bass, such a great reminder that we all have a role to play in ensuring adolescents have medically accurate, shame-free, affirming, and supportive sexual health information. I think somebody earlier that I was talking to said there has been mic drop moments throughout the entire event today, and truly there has been. So to wrap us up, I want to welcome back to the stage Laura Lang, the CEO of Honestly Sexual Health Collective for Youth.
Wow, what a day. I am also fired up, and just it's so gratifying to get to sit here each year at SPARK Tank and hear about the work. It makes the work that we do at Honestly mean so much more, and to see the kind of reach that these projects are having now in our community is just phenomenal and inspiring. I really want to take a minute to honor Carly, our incredible, oh yeah. Thank you, Carly, for all of your work to make this event so dynamic and special, and for the work you do every single day with these cohort organizations. Carly manages our SPARK Tank event and our SPARK Innovation OKC project, and she does a phenomenal job. And she's a great MC too. So thank you, Carly. We're all so grateful for your work. I also want to honor the rest of our team at Honestly. If you're an Honestly staff member, we did have a board member here earlier today too. If you're an Honestly staff member, would you just stand up for a second and let us recognize you too? I really love to brag on this team wherever I go, whether it's talking to other CEOs and telling them about the team that I get to have work alongside of me every day, or it's out in the community, or just in my circle of friends. I feel really honored to get to work alongside such a talented group of people and such a caring and compassionate and loving group of people. I also want to thank our panelists who were excellent, and all of our guests. Thank you to those of you in the room today and those of you watching online. We're so grateful in your interest in this event, and thank you for helping us make it another successful Spark Tank. If you were inspired by what you saw and heard today, we invite you to join our movement. You can do that in several ways, which are outlined on our website at honestlyokc.org. Up here. If you're looking for resources to talk to the adolescents in your life, you can find a wealth of information and resources on our website as well. And of course, you can also follow us on social media channels at honestlyokc. We look forward to engaging more with each of you as we continue to provide critical resources for the caregivers and youth in Oklahoma County so that they have the information, tools, resources, and support that they need to help them have important conversations about love, sex, and relationships, and to ultimately aid young people in making healthy decisions for their future. Thank you for watching and supporting Honestly at Spark Tank. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and happy Pride. Thank you.